Okay, I'm ready to share whenever you will.
Don't share yet.
I will not.
Don't share. Get all these going.
Once in a generation, an event happens that captures the imagination of the entire world. The stories of J.R.R. Tolkien are introduced in new and exciting ways. For over 20 years, the OneRing.net has championed the fan experience. And tonight, fans worldwide come together as Prime Video introduces us to their own take on the Middle-earth Legendarium. Ladies and gentlemen, boffins and brace girdles, elves and Ainur, welcome to the Second Age.
All right, let's get this party started. Welcome to Torn Tuesday. We got a very special episode. Cliff, you're here, right?
Can you imagine that March Madness is happening and there's barely a week? Maybe, okay, we've got a good week left of March, but oh my gosh, do we have something very special to announce for the fans? It's our annual pop culture smash up popularity voting contest of absolute pandemonium, where anything goes, and how you want to vote on your favorites in these crazy categories. And boy, do we have something this year. It's a whopper.
We have been doing this for many years. It's called Middle-earth March Madness.
Indeed.
It's a Tolkien take on everybody's favorite sports betting thing, but there's no bets here. The only thing you can do is vote. That's all we're asking. If you go to theonering.net, the link might be in the description. You can see a link to where you can vote. The full Middle-earth March Madness bracket is here. Look at this. This is 64 teams in 32 matchups, and you at home are going to vote and vote and vote over the next couple weeks until we get to the final winner. The theme this year, every year we choose a different theme. This year
Yes, we do.
is Battle of the Ages. Cliff, can you explain what Battle of the Ages means?
Okay, what the Battle of the Ages means, loosely translated, in the past, we have covered obvious territory like populating characters, really familiar and maybe some obscure Tolkien characters from the Lord of the Rings against each other in the March Madness bracket, a popularity contest / voting frenzy type of thing that gets people engaged in conversations at a lot of other levels about how they relate to these people, these characters in Middle-earth. And then we've shifted things around to many other variables. Well, hello there. And we even have this year a voting contest on all the great historical events that are categorized over the different ages. And of course, we know the first age, the second age, and the third age, where all the events of the War of the Ring happen at the very end, at the closing stages of the third age. And Amazon's upcoming TV series is, as we popularly theorize, that it is set at the end of the second age. So now we're going to look at all different ages set against each other in the 4 quadrants of the bracket, starting with the pre-first age, because there are so many amazing and very, very big seismic events that happened in Professor Tolkien's mythology, even before the first age was calculated by the elves. So then we'll have the first age against the second and the third age, and all these brackets all put together are going to cause, I'm sure, waves of conversation amongst us all about, what is most important, or what we find ourselves feeling the most feels. If you want to make your vote because you think it deserves a historical place in voting, or it's just because the event makes you feel something visceral in the way that Professor Tolkien describes the events in the Silmarillion, well, here we go. This is going to be really great stuff.
And again, you can see the whole bracket in full res at theonering.net.
On the main site, on the main page, the One Ring.
On the main page. And you
Not
can
that
find...
anybody uses web browsers anymore to go to websites, but yes, there it is, please. And I'm joking. I'm joking. But yes, anyways, we do recommend everyone get that full res, because we have some great volunteers, great people helping out on our staff at theonering.net, and Chris as well, put a lot of time into putting this graphic together. That's really cool. So definitely check it out.
And there's a new way to vote this year. We've put each bracket has its own link on this page.
Right.
Again, if you can find on the website, and then if you click on that, it takes you to the voting bracket, and you click which one you think should win in this round. And then we close each round after a few days. So there are 64 teams, 64 battles to talk about. I don't know most of these.
32 battles.
32 battle. Wait, no, 1, 2.
Yeah,
my
32
math.
battles, 64 events, 32 matchups. Therefore.
Yeah, there's 64 somewhere in there.
Right.
So,
You know what? Math is hard, said the Barbie doll when you pull the string. And she said, "Math is hard." That was me. Yes.
Well, we've got 64 things to explain to me, because I don't know most of them. So we've got an all-star team of torn staffers, theonering.net. We've been around for 20 years. We're still going strong. We're streaming live every week, and this is the start of Middle-earth March Madness over the next couple weeks. Jim is going to run the PowerPoint that has details on everything, and then we're joined by people that can help explain all the lore. We've got Kirsten Green Dragon in the corner, Kathy Garfameo under me, and then Josh Long Elisar, who is our collectibles editor, in the other corner. And who knows who else might join in. I sent the link to everybody, and if they want to join, maybe next week we'll have a different set of people. I'm looking at you, Varking. You can join in next week. So Jim, let's get this started. Kirsten, go ahead.
Can I just do a little bit of a sort of overview of this year, a couple of little things before we start to dive into the brackets?
Yes.
And I have open on my computer a document with the history of Middle-earth March Madness. So if anything comes up where we're like, wait, who won in that year? I have that open. But 2012 was the first year that we did it, in fact. So this is our 11th Middle-earth March Madness. 11, because 2012 was 1, and then so on. It's that math again. Who said there would be math in this?
It's supposed to be fun.
So this is the 11th one, and I'm really excited about the way that we've divided it up this year, and this idea of having the Battle of the Ages, because I'm one of those people, I've read Silmarillion. To be honest, I haven't read History of Middle-earth. So I'm not the most in-depth in the lore of the other ages outside of what's in The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. Like, as I said, I've only read Silmarillion once. So to me, it's really helpful to brush up on my history. But of course, we couldn't cover all the events of the ages, but we staffers voted behind the scenes to pick our favorites, to narrow it down, and that was the list we came up with. Now, a couple of things about this year that are a little different for those folks who are used to playing along at home with March Madness. Normally we seed our brackets, so based on how the staff voted for their favorite characters, props, moments from the movies, whatever the theme is in any given year, we make sure that the most popular one in one bracket doesn't go up against the second most popular in the first round. They're seeded. This year we decided not to seed because we wanted to begin with brackets that were in chronological order. The whole point was to help folks to refresh their memories about, okay, what happened when? How did it go with the creation of Ardor, and what led into the first stage, and da-da-da. So the events are in chronological order. Obviously,
that is really key, and I think that's the best thing. I mean, cognitively speaking, a lot of us, even old seasoned diehards, still struggle to get through the Silmarillion sometimes. So it really is helpful. It's really great.
But the matchups are a little bit more challenging because you've got really important things right in the very first round.
Oh.
Right. The other thing we thought this year is, unlike in some years where it's maybe a lot of very popular characters that everyone's going to be wanting certain ones to win, we felt that for a lot of folks playing along, a lot of the events pre-Third Age, pre the time of The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, might not be very familiar to them. And therefore they might be like, well, I don't really know what I want to vote for. So what we're doing today and tomorrow, and possibly into Thursday on our homepage, which does mean you have to go to a website, but we'll share it on our Facebook as well, is posts that take you through the matchups and describe the events for you. So you can, oh, okay, oh, I get it. So when the dwarves were created, this is what happened. And so for me, I've been editing the posts that some of our brilliant staffers have written to get them up on WordPress. And I'm being like, oh, this is really helpful, refreshing my memory. The interesting thing is, because, as Justin pointed out, we've got this different way of voting this year where you have a button for each of the 4 brackets. So you click to vote for the pre-first stage, and then you click to vote for the first stage. If you wanted to, you could read the article about the pre-first stage today, and you could click to vote for pre-first stage today, and you could choose not to vote in the first stage category until you had a chance to read tomorrow's article about the first stage category. So we're being frightfully scholarly this year, as well as being silly with our March Madness fun.
And some of the strategy that we've learned in the last 2 years during this pandemic, going through this debate, is when we get to the final 4, it becomes like, oh my God, I should have voted for this other thing to get it out of the way. So there's a little strategy to voting. So I highly recommend, I know you're excited to vote now, highly recommend holding off, wait till you hear everything we have to say today, and read the article tomorrow and the next day before you cast your vote, because there will be a strategy. Now, one of the reasons I think a Battle of the Ages is here is because, you know, the Rings of Power is coming out September 2nd, and the first image we got was the Light of the Two Trees. That is pre-First Age. So we know that the TV show is going to go from the pre-First Stage all the way to the Second Age, suppose, you know, that it's about, and then we've already seen all the movies that are based in the Third Age. So there's a chance that many of the things that you see in this bracket could be included in Amazon's huge show. We just don't know. So what a perfect opportunity this year to dive into some of the great battles of the ages. I guess let's jump in. Jim, do you want to kind of guide us through?
Happy to. One quick question. It was because you mentioned that Josh is on. He's our collectibles guy, and I know that he has a quick announcement about something that's happening on this Friday that you might want to hit.
Yeah, jump in.
So Jim and I are getting ready to film our 4th episode of our Collectibles podcast, our Collecting the Precious podcast. And, one of the benefits of going to Comic-Con and collecting and stuff is you get to make friends with people at some of the collectibles companies. And obviously Weta Workshop, we've had a pretty good relationship with, and I personally got to be friends with several of them over the years. And so I hit Daniel Falconer up here about a month or so ago, and wanted to see if he would be willing to come on and chat with us about the collectibles. I mean, we're celebrating the 20th anniversary of all the films, which means we're celebrating the 20th anniversary of all the collectibles. And so on Friday, Jim and I are going to sit down with Daniel from Weta, and we're going to talk about, the last 20 years of collecting Middle Earth. And we've collected questions from you guys and other collectors, and we're just going to kind of go over a bunch of stuff and kind of reminisce about where we've gone, where we're going. Maybe get Daniel to tease something if we can manage to do that. He's pretty good at not. But it's going to be a lot of fun. Obviously, that's for me personally, that's the area where maybe my depth of knowledge is greater than some of the book stuff, having only read the Silmarillion one time. But I really think it's going to be a lot of fun. Hopefully everybody will enjoy it and have a good time with it. It's kind of one of those things that I've been wanting to do that since we started this, sit down with somebody and have a chat, especially with the 20th anniversary coming up. And so really excited that Daniel was willing to take time out of his busy schedule with all the stuff that they're doing down there and sit down with us. And so
there's a question from the chat, Josh. Varking wants to ask Weta to restock all their Dwarven collectibles.
Hey, Josh, I have a question for you. Do you have any collectibles from outside of the Third Age?
I have an Isildur statue that Weta did here, 12, 18 months ago. Obviously, it takes place during the prologue, so that's before the Third Age. I have a couple of Isildur busts. I have an Elendil bust. I have Barad-dûr.
If anyone has a replica of the One Ring,
yeah, have that.
Second Age.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think. Yeah, I mean, a few things here and there, stuff like that. Obviously, a lot of the collectibles have take place within the Third Age because that's where the film.
Right.
So, depending on what Amazon does with the show and how those go and who's making stuff, that's really going to be the first time that a large swath of collectibles will have been made that take place outside of the Third Age. So
I'd love to know if collectors at home, like if anybody who watches this or any of our fellow fans out on the internet have things from like maybe the 60s and 70s, maybe they're even kind of homemade collectibles that are of some of the Valar or of the Two Trees. Or I would just love to know if people have pre-First Age collectibles and things like that.
And that's
I have long wanted to have a banner of the Two Trees similar to what we see in Arwen's room. I mean, I was like, when I moved into my new place, I was going to try and paint that on the wall. And then I realized I don't know how to paint very well. That could be disastrous. But yeah, I've always wanted the Two Trees on my
wall. When is that conversation going public?
We're gonna film Friday night. And obviously we're doing it, have to do it at a certain time for us when we film it, because we want to make sure, it's afternoon-ish for Daniel, because, being here and being there is a different. So we're going to film it. I've got to get a little graphic made for the YouTubes, so that way it looks nice. And then I'm hoping I want to have it posted, depending on how long the graphics part take. I'd like to have it posted middle of next week, end of next week at the latest. I mean, it's putting it in a movie maker and doing that part is easy for me. So it's just a matter of getting that graphic, putting it in there, making sure the recording went good and all that kind of thing. So hopefully by the end of next week. And I will also add too, we're one person away from 1,000 subscribers on the channel. So hopefully, yeah.
So hit that subscribe on his channel, on his collectible channel that we always link to, and hit subscribe on this channel. The chat room is saying, please. Yes, go ahead.
I was just going to say that's perfect timing then for us to announce it at WonderCon, because we're going to be at WonderCon
next week.
Next week.
Yeah.
Right. And so we will make sure we have a link of it, something, up on the screen.
Oh, that'd be awesome.
Because it'll be new content that same weekend, which is the reminder to come to WonderCon for everybody in Southern California, Anaheim. We've got 2 panels, not 1, 2 panels.
The main panel, I believe, is Friday afternoon.
Yeah, Friday afternoon. Yeah.
Very good. And if Amazon, if you're watching, don't come to our panel. We're going to show some stuff that you don't want anyone to see. So don't come. But we want all of you fans to be there, and you'll want to be there.
In San Diego, we had some special effects people in our audience.
I can't confirm or deny anything that we've heard. There is a whole lot of dwarves to vote for, and elves to vote for, and Maiar to vote for here in this thing. I honestly tried to vote, and I can't even answer most of the questions because I don't know what's going on in any of these. So, Jim, can you let's jump in, because I need to know. I'm going to ask some stupid questions today.
Ask questions. If you got questions, you're on the chat. Drop them in the chat or somewhere, and we'll try to pass them along. Because a lot of this stuff is going to be obscure. I love the collectibles question, and you might find out as we go through that there are some collectibles. So if you've got a replica. I think it was a noble collection, the Ring of Barahir. Well, we might hear some about that, and that's a first age collectible.
Or a Balrog.
Or a Balrog. That's right. So yeah, we'll see as we go through. At any rate, we're going to go through bracket by bracket. We'll populate it. We've got a few little pictures here, but I'm just going to throw these up because we're going to go work through the matchups. And if you're doing math and following along, there's 8 matchups in each of our 4 brackets, so 32 matchups. And some of these may be obscure. Some of them, like Kathy pointed out, are going to be really tough right out of the gate because we got big events that are going to be happening that you may even be familiar with, even though it's even back in the pre-first age. So here's the first matchup. As you would expect, it's the creation of Arda and Ea, the heavens and the earth, with the music of the Ainur, coming out at Valian Year 0, in effect. Music that's marred by the discord of Morgoth. And so you get this wonderful music of Eru Iluvatar, and then it plays itself out through all the history of Middle Earth and the races of elves, men, dwarves, Ents, etc. And that's going up against the creation of the first light that happens in Middle Earth, which takes the form of 2 great lamps that are created by the Vala Aule, the smith, in effect, who creates a great lamp in the north and a great lamp in the south, and so that's our first matchup.
Can I just, I promise I won't chime in on everyone or we'll be here all night, but but I remember we touched on this. I think it was when we were watching and squeeing over the trailer that dropped during the Super Bowl, this idea of song in Tolkien, because we saw that image of Disa in the Rings of Power singing, and you know, it's been discussed that her character kind of sings to the mountain, and singing is such a key thing in Tolkien. He's got so many songs. He so often has his characters sing a song in the most unexpected place. Last night I was rereading Sam in Cirith Ungol trying to rescue Frodo, and he breaks into song, which seems like such a strange thing to do under duress like that. And I love that the whole thing for Tolkien began in song. The whole world was created through song. I just think that's cool.
So we're voting here on the first match in the first bracket. We're voting on the creation of the world versus the creation of the 2 light sources, the suns, basically.
That's right. And again, like
not the sun. Sun comes later.
No, it's not the sun and the moon. That's right. A couple generations later.
The 2 light sources. I said kind of like the sun, right?
Yeah. And so to Kirsten's point too, the presence of music is extraordinarily important, and so is the presence of light. And we're going to get several versions of the creation and the destruction of light. And the first 2 shots at this are actually accessible. The fact that these lights exist on the earth, on Arda, on 2 great big pillars, means that they can be attacked, which ultimately they are, before we get to the sun and the moon.
Spoiler.
That's right.
All right, and if you want to vote, again, go to theonering.net, the main website, if you believe in websites still, and you can find Middle-earth March Madness launches today, and then there's 4 buttons. We are on the first button, pre-first age voting. That is the top left bracket that we're going through. Click on the pre-first age bracket, and there is all the things. I still, where can I get more information on these 2 things, Jim, on the first one? Like, where can I get more information? Should I dive into a certain book?
Oh, well, actually, you can go to the onering.net site. We've just dropped an article on all of these events about the first age. We'll give you a little thumbnail on it. There are great encyclopedic resources that you can find online if you're good at Google searching. If you want to, a lot of these pre-first age activities are being drawn out of the Silmarillion. And so, especially in the first age and pre-first age, you're going to find a lot of that content, even more than you'll find in the appendices. The Lord of the Rings appendices kind of skips over the first age because Tolkien was saving it up for the Silmarillion.
And the chat room is very politely reminding everyone that if you don't read like I do, you can watch Nerd of the Rings on YouTube. He's got hundreds of videos about the entire lore of all this stuff. So if that's how you consume stuff, that's the way to go. Jim, what's the next matchup here?
Matchup 2. These are tough ones because we've got a lot of dwarf fans, and Aule creating the dwarves, and now we're skipping to the year of the trees. So the first matchup chronologically here is the creation of another set of lights. This is actually the image that we saw first coming out of Amazon before it even was called the Rings of Power. This was the first image that we saw, and many of us caught way in the background that we've got the light of the two trees, which means this was a pre-First Age image. And so after the destruction of the two lamps, which was one of those bubble events that didn't get onto our matchups, we had the creation of the two trees. In this case, the Vala Yavanna, who is the maker of all growing things, was charged to come up with another form of light. And so we get the trees Telperion and Laurelin in the realm of Aman, where Valinor is, and they are lighting up everything. And that's what we see in these images of the two trees. And then that creates, in effect, another timeline. So we now are into the year of the trees, pre-First Age. And it's year 1 of the year of the trees when those two trees show up. 1,000 years later, for those doing math, we have the next event that we've seeded in the tournament, which is Aule, who's the smith. Kind of gets impatient. We're waiting around for the children of Iluvatar to show up, starting with the elves. But Aule thinks, I've got some ideas of my own, and he creates the race of the dwarves in the year of the trees 1001, starting with the 7 fathers of the dwarves, including the great Durin the Deathless. And he doesn't get real far with it because he figures out that he's outrun his headlights of the two trees, if you will, and gets kind of rebuked by Iluvatar for going out of bounds on his life creation thing. So he's about to destroy the dwarves when Iluvatar stops him and simply puts the dwarves to sleep and says, hang on, we're going to have the elves waking up, spoilers, later on in this bracket. And after they wake up, you can bring the dwarves back. But for now, we're going to put them to sleep. But they get created first, even before the elves wake up, and certainly before men wake up.
Well, let's throw
this
it to
artwork. I was going to say, I love this artwork with Ted Naismith because it's 7 dwarves.
There's a lot of great Ted Naismith
that
we try to grab. So kudos to him. Yeah.
So Kathy, sell me on this. Am I voting for the creation of the two trees or the creation of the dwarves?
Well, once the lamps are destroyed and everyone's plunged into darkness, a new source of light is a very welcome thing. And like I said, I personally have to vote for the trees because, like I said, I've always wanted that artwork on my walls. But creation of the dwarves is equally important because they kind of make a lot of the stuff that, most of the main swords that we know of, Sting and Glamdring, and were created by dwarves, as well as some of the major jewelry that is crowns and whatnot. So they're important, and Varking would kill us if there weren't, if we didn't. But I'm going to vote for the trees. But that's just me.
But
Josh, who are you voting for in this match?
Ooh, I think I'm probably gonna go with the dwarves, just because, like I said, I've only read the Sil once, so I'm like you in this instance where, like, my knowledge. I'm glad we're doing the articles and stuff like that because I need to read it and really refresh some of what little thoughts I did have on it at one time, in the past. But so long story short, I'm gonna go with the dwarves because being a big fan of Gimli and everything, I'm gonna go with them because if you don't have this event, you don't get to one of my favorite characters in Gimli. So I think I feel a connection of I owe it to the creation to get to the favorite. So that's
I just got a note in Discord that Varking says if we find out you did not vote for the dwarves, we will kick you off Discord. We're gonna have to discuss that as moderators, Varking.
Yeah, because that's voter tampering.
And we're very familiar with. Never mind. All right, Jim. Moving on. What's the next match?
Well, the next matchup is a response to that creation of the dwarves thing. Like Kathy said, the dwarves are going to become notorious for building stuff, constructing things and making things. And to do all of that, they need fuel. And to get fuel in Middle Earth, that primarily is going to come from forests, which concerns Aule's wife, Yavanna, who says, hang on a second. I am a little concerned about my creation of the trees. So I'm going to make me some Ents, some Oradrim. And so that's the next matchup. So maybe you like the dwarves and they get put to sleep, but when the Ents are described by Gandalf in The Lord of the Rings, he describes them as the oldest living things, and in this way they are, because Yavanna animates them. They don't know how to speak yet. In fact, they will learn language later from the elves, but they are made to be defenders and shepherds of the trees. So that's also around year 1001 in the year of the trees. And then the next event is the actual awakening of the first children of Iluvatar, the elves. And they wake up on this huge lake in kind of way eastern Middle Earth in a little cove called, I don't know how to pronounce it, Cuvienen? Yeah, however that is. And there's 144 of them, which is interesting. And they don't wake up all at the same time. And that 12 becomes a really important component for Tolkien and he does the maths, actually.
Well, don't the elves wake up naked?
They may. I don't know that Ted Nasmith drew them naked here, but they wake up in couples. So initially you've got they're literally named the first, the second, and the third in Elvish, of course, and they wake up next to their spouse. And if you've read The Nature of Middle Earth, Tolkien thought a lot about the cycles of procreation and how many elves there were, and if he had enough time to have that population grow in time for later events that we'll see in terms of migration. So he's thinking a lot about these things. But here at the Awakening, under the stars, the elves are animated, and they enter.
It's always a good thing when you wake up next to your spouse. It's much better than when you wake up next to somebody who isn't your spouse.
Naked.
Yeah.
Yeah, like say a Balrog or something. Yeah, that'd be just terrible.
Well, this is the first matchup with a tree or an Ent, so let's go to our resident Ent expert, Quickbeam 2000. Cliff, why shouldn't I vote for Ents?
Are you kidding me? Are you going to ask me a question about the creation of the Ents? Look, you know who's going to win this bracket. I just think it was very unfortunately seeded. That's all I really want to say, because now everybody's going to vote for the creation of the Eldar on the shores of Cuivienen. Everyone's going to vote for that, obviously, and the poor old Ents are unfortunately seeded in that spot. But
this is your chance, Cliff. This is your chance. Let's hear your attack ad.
I'm not.
Get your vote.
I'm not built that. All right, listen. If you want to breathe oxygen on this planet, remember when Treebeard and his poetry were talking about the shade that is green and cool. You know what's green and cool? Oxygen. There you go. I just sold it. I know who I'm voting for.
Well, of Gondor in the chat.
I'm buying it.
Of Gondor in the chat room wants to say, you could say no one is on their side.
I'm telling you, I'm on their side because I believe in photosynthesis, and I believe in really, the powerful ecological statements that Tolkien managed to make way, way, way back in the 50s, which are more pertinent now in 2022 than they ever were. I come on, people, seriously. Yavanna had the right instincts. Yavanna was right. There's my bumper sticker. # Yavanna
was right.
All right, so that final
There you go.
thought on Ents versus the Elves Awakening. Let's just fast forward to the Third Age. Who is the race that came to defend all of Middle Earth when evil was taking over? I believe it was the Ents. The elves had checked out. Most of them had sailed away. Elrond's like, you guys are on your own. The elves are leaving. I'm just saying, for when you're playing the long game, you want the Ents on your side. So let's give a little upset vote this time, and let's let the Ents march forward in the next bracket. Jim, let's carry on. Continue.
Matchup 4. Morgoth chained by Tulkas. Now, what's happening is that Morgoth, or Melkor still, he hasn't been called Morgoth yet, has noticed that the elves have woken up, and he is not happy about that. In fact, he tries to start destroying Iluvatar's creation. That's kind of his mojo. And there's a whole series. So you can see it's 1099 now. So we're about 49 years or so from the elves waking up. And Morgoth's just being a pain. So the Valar decide, well, this has got to stop. And they have Aule create this giant chain that has a name. I'm trying to remember what it was. And they wrestle and capture Morgoth and bring him back to Valinor before this is the throne of Mandos. And he ultimately gets tossed into the halls of Mandos to cool his heel for 3 other ages, at least of Valinor ages. And so it's the capture of Melkor to extract that kind of evil. Now, what they didn't do is capture all those Balrog types, and Sauron is active at this point still. So the elves are kind of protected, and that's going to come up in this second event.
And who's Tulkas?
Tulkas is the strong arm man of the Valar. So he's
The chain was Angainor, I believe.
yeah. So for extra points, that's right.
I still wonder, is it Angenor and Gainor? I struggle with that one.
Or maybe Angainor, but I think it's GA, isn't it? So it would be a hard G, I think.
We have of Gondor in the YouTube chat saying Anginor, and I can't get my head around. I mean, I know some positions of vowels and consonants always go a certain way.
I thought it was Angai, but I'm obviously misremembering.
You can find it in our article because we have named it there. Actually, that's another point. If you're going into the voting, if you click on the pictures, at least for the first age and the pre-first age at this point, you'll find some more detailed descriptions of each one.
I'm really glad you mentioned that, Jim. It's really kind of a beautiful design. When you're at the main website, theonering.net, and if you click into the pre-first age bracket, it will take you to another voting screen where you'll see a convenient little question mark that leads you to an additional screen of illustrated information for all of those brackets in those first 2 quadrants. And it is really accessible and easy to look up information right at your fingertips while you're even on that extra voting screen.
Well, this makes educating the population or all the fans on first age, second age, pre-first age, all of this stuff fun. As opposed to go read these really thick, dense books. You've only got a week to do it. No, now they could just do this and have fun doing it.
The second event on this matchup, because Melkor has now been chained and is out of the picture, the Valar are still worried about these first children of Iluvatar, the Eldar. And so they decide to send Orome, another Valar, or one of the Valar, who is the hunter, and he encourages some captains, some representatives, some ambassadors from these 3 families of the elves to come over and visit Valinor and see the light of the 2 trees, which is transformative for them, and encourage them to in effect, migrate from Middle Earth, cross the Great Sea on a floating island that Ulmo, another one of the Valar, helps them to get ultimately to the utter and utmost west. But initially, we have this event where the 3 kindred come and visit Aman, which is where Valinor is, and learn about the Valar, learn about their risks, and decide whether or not they're going to emigrate to the Undying Lands.
Well, the chat room is pretty unanimous in voting for Melkor chained by Tulkas in this one. Does anyone here on the panel have any arguments for the three kindred Eldar?
No, I kind of like, well, okay, yes. Chaining up that dude is great and all that. But we know that the elves sailing, going to Aman and seeing the light and being raised in it changes them. It kind of creates that desire that once they go back into Middle Earth and they do all the various things there, they're always longing to go back to Aman, even though the trees are gone by then. So it gives them that impetus to want to return at some point.
Yeah, and I guess you could argue that if they hadn't gone to Aman, the Silmarils would never have been created. And for sure, if they hadn't left Middle Earth, they wouldn't have had the issue of having to try and get ships to sail back to Middle Earth, and therefore the Kinslaying potentially wouldn't have happened. So
yeah, you're right, Kirsten.
A domino effect.
Yeah, this is a catalytic event. It is going to drive so much of the rest of the history of all of the ages that are to come, including even the ages where the elves are returning back. I mean, this is the catalytic event that launches ultimately the rebellion of the elves, or some of them, the Noldor especially, against the Valar. It sends Galadriel from the Undying Lands back to Middle Earth because she wants a kingdom of her own. It has her refusing to be reconciled to the Valar, so she's still under their doom. So there's so much history that is launched from this catalytic event of the Eldar arriving for the first time in Aman. So there you go.
And that's a very pretty picture. I like that.
All right, moving on.
There was a person, Monica in the live chat was saying, how do I get my vote to register? Well, if you're on the Common Ninja voting page, if I was doing it on my phone like I did just now, you scroll up to the tippy top, and in the upper left corner should be an orange button that says vote now. And you use that, and you'll get an intermediary screen that pops up, and you get to see A versus B on all of them, and then hit at the very bottom of that picture who you want to vote for in all the categories. And I just finished the whole process, and it's really simple and really cool to do this. So on to the next matchup.
Kirsten, how long do people have to vote in this first round?
Friday, I think.
This first round runs until the end of the 24th, which is Thursday. So you've got a couple of days. We've got the article about the pre-first stage already up there. If you're like, I just listened to 2 hours of Torn Tuesday and I need a recap, read the article on the homepage. Tomorrow we'll put up an article about the first age, and then either later tomorrow or first thing Thursday, we'll put up an article about the second age. Excellent. And end of Thursday, round one closes. Friday, we will announce the winners in round one, and we'll launch voting for round two.
And if you look at the graphic of the entire bracket, up along the top, we have every deadline for every round. So you just pay attention to those dates, mark them in your calendar, so every 3 days, every 2 days or whatever.
And we want a clean election, folks. Do not vote twice. Do not vote 3 times. Do not vote across state lines. Jim, continue. Feanor did nothing wrong.
About 100 years after the elves wake up on their lake, the dwarves get reanimated. They're animated in Mount Gundabad, which we saw a little bit in the Hobbit movie. So way in the northern mountains. And I guess they don't like their environment. So Durin the Deathless is one of those guys, and they decide to migrate southward and end up finding the very place that we see in the movies, in Khazad-dûm and Moria and the Mirror and the Dwarrodelf, and all of those kinds of references happen right here way back in the Year of the Trees. So that Durin the Deathless founds and starts building up all of these great structures, the endless stair and the bridge over the abyss and the second hall. All of that stuff starts getting built way back in the Year of the Trees by Durin the Deathless. And then So that's around 1050 to 1250 in the year of the trees.
Well, I suppose if anyone has the Doors of Moria and stuff like that, then we are looking at second age or third age, or I mean, first age, because of how long ago that was built.
Right. So Doors of Moria is more of a Celebrimbor second agey sort of a thing. Well, we may get to that.
Yeah.
And so, unfortunately, if you're really into dwarves, you're up against one of the most memorable characters ever. A character so important that Tolkien applied her name to his own wife, so it's inscribed on their tombstones in Oxford, which is the birth of Luthien. She is the child of Melian, who is one of the Maiars, as well as Eru Thingol, who is an elven king. He's actually one of the first kings who decided not to migrate to Valinor. He kind of fell asleep in these woods, and he built his own kingdom and Menegroth. And so you've got a lot of story that's embedded here. And we have the birth of Luthien, who is this wondrous elf, and we're going to find her popping up later here in the first age.
Let's go to Josh then. Josh, besides not being deathless, do you have any thoughts on who should win this bracket?
So while Jim was talking and everything, I was really thinking of like a sales pitch for during the Deathless and Khazad-dûm, and my thought process is this: that first off, that sequence in both the books and the movies obviously very important when the Fellowship gets to Moria, but without during the Deathless building Khazad-dûm and helping build Moria, we don't get the Balrog and Gandalf sequence. We don't get Gandalf's fall, which then he becomes Gandalf the White and helps turn the tide during the War of the Ring and helps make sure Sauron is defeated. So
we also don't get Mithril.
Right. And so without this event happening, maybe Fellowship of the Ring, things happen differently. Maybe Gandalf doesn't fall. Maybe it doesn't become Gandalf the White. I mean, I really think people need to think about this event and put some weight into this. This is very important here, folks. I'm winking and nodding. You should vote for the dwarves.
Does anyone want to defend the woman?
She is.
That probably was a hard argument against a female character.
We ought to get our resident women to talk about.
That was a very loaded question. Does anyone want to defend the woman? I mean,
Justin, really, for sure? If I remember correctly, she went in and she faced off against the dude holding the Silmarils. I mean, she was not afraid of anything. I don't think she really needed to be defended.
Well, she's the only non-Valar who actually beat Morgoth.
Yeah.
The chat says, "Excuse you, Luthien is more than just a pretty face."
Yeah.
Well, tell me more then. I don't know what she does other than she's on someone's gravestone that we all respect and admire.
I will loan you my copy of the Silmarillion.
Just tell me what she did.
Well, I will loan you my copy of the Silmarillion.
Justin has not read the Hobbit. Get to that. You know he ain't making it through the Silmarillion.
We're gonna pick this up in the first age. Because
there's more Baron or Luthien later on. Yeah.
All right. Next battle.
Okay, battle 6. Here we go. This is a really tough one. This is one of those. If we had seeded these would have probably been very high seeds in this bracket, because number 1 is Feanor, probably the most prolific artisan of all of the elves ever, and a real jerk when it comes to his relationships with most people, including Galadriel. He creates the Silmarils, capturing the pure light of the two trees into these jewels, which Varda, another one of the Valar, the Star Kindler, literally blesses so much, hallows, so that if anyone evil or unworthy touches them, they get burned. I mean, and these are brightness beyond imagining. And Feanor makes these things.
Is that how we get the snap?
The snap. These are the Lord of the Rings versions, I guess, or the Middle Earth or the Tolkien versions of the.
Okay. Put it into something I understand now. Okay.
These are like Infinity Stones. Better. And then that's up against this really significant event, which is the destruction of the two trees. As Kathy said earlier, the descent of Arda back into darkness. In this case, we see both Morgoth, who has now been released from prison because he's faked repentance, teaming up with this uber evil thing in the form of a spider called Ungoliant, who is the sire ultimately of Shelob, who we see in the Third Age. And so they are surrounded by unlight, and they attack the two trees with Melkor piercing them, and then Ungoliant, as you can see in this picture, just sucking them dry.
So I'm going to take a first stab and say my vote goes for the two trees destroyed, because I have a feeling we're going to see that in Amazon's show.
That would be interesting.
Right.
That could be interesting. The thing that happens, and I don't know that we have this in the event, when after the destruction happens, two Valar rush in. One is Yavanna, who starts singing, and one is Nienna, who starts weeping. And so you've got the combination of grief and song in an attempt to revive these two trees. And they fail, except for one last surge where Telperion, the silver tree, produces a final flower. And Laurelin, the golden tree, produces a final fruit. Interestingly, beforehand, and we didn't, these also were events that didn't get into the mix. Seedlings, especially of Telperion, were groomed, and they ultimately became the sires of what became the White Tree of Gondor. So when we see that, it goes all the way back to this event in the death of one of these trees. And that life, it's not the same as a brilliant glowing tree, but it still is the offspring of the seeds of Telperion that are still being passed on, even when Aragorn finally finds one.
Well, and that demonstrates a long through line, whereas the Silmarils were very, very important. Obviously, I mean, the whole book is named Silmarillion, but you don't see much continuation of the story of the Silmarils into the Third Age, or am I mistaken?
Here's the deal. You can still see one of the Silmarils today. If you go outside and look up, it depends on the time of the year, in either the morning sky or the night sky, shortly after sunset or before sunrise, and look up for the brightest thing you can see other than the moon and the sun, that's a Silmaril. Now, we might call it Venus, but that's Erendil in Vingalot sailing the heavens with a Silmaril on the prow. So
Like an Erimdil, our brightest star.
yes.
Is the Arkenstone from The Hobbit a Silmaril?
No.
But it is a fun theory that people like to banter about year after year.
Last one made a very good point in the Discord chat about choosing to vote for things which were about creation rather than about things that were destruction.
Right. Yeah.
But this is an interesting matchup because we've had creation that's very much positive creation, like creation of elves, creation of dwarves, creation of the lamps.
Yep.
The Silmarils, was that a positive creation or was that a creation of greed?
That's a great question.
A creation of overreaching ambition. One of the best things I think about Feanor is that even to casual Tolkien fans, he's everybody's favorite deep cut. If you want to show anybody in the world that you've got some smarts about Tolkien and you drop a Feanor meme on your timeline, then people know, okay, you're making a deep cut. But he is just, I think, the most fascinating and polarizing figure in all those early histories, because when he was born, he caused the death of his mother and the power of the spirit that left her body and went into him, and then his obsession with these things, and his oath, and his sons taking up the oath, and the kinslaying, and all of it is Professor Tolkien's cautionary tale about having an ego at that level, even not among the Maiar, where it's bad enough to have that kind of ego among the Maiar or the Valar, God forbid, but having that kind of ego among a very talented elf, a Noldorin, oh my gosh, here we go. I kind of love all that stuff about the Feanor story. And as weird and self-destructive as he was, he probably gets a lot of votes, I think, because people are into that story. It is one of the most fascinating cautionary tales that Tolkien has to give us.
And it's as someone said, it's the Silmarillion, the Silmarils. So let's take a quick vote. Show of hands here. Raise your hand if you're voting for Feanor.
I'm voting for Feanor.
Oh my God! And raise your hand if you're voting for the Two Trees Destroyed.
Okay.
There you go.
I'm wearing the baby.
Yes, you are. All right, Jim, moving on.
There's another interesting, before I move on, there's another interesting character that really is threaded into both of these events, which is Galadriel. Because Galadriel was thought in her hair to have resident in it the light of the two trees, especially of Laurel and the golden tree, which is why some people get really upset at that trailer from the Rings of
That trailer shot, I think we tweeted it this week. That trailer shot where someone grabs Galadriel's hair.
No. You don't be messing with Galadriel's hair. And Feanor did try to mess with Galadriel's hair. And in some ways you could say maybe he made the Silmarils because Galadriel wouldn't give him any of that shining hair. So he had to, it was.
I just don't know how they're going to creatively explain that hair touching thing, like boundaries, dude. All right, moving on.
He sure doesn't look very happy about it in the trailer, so I think it could be significant.
So,
I think she's going to take a knife to his throat because she's got that beautiful light with the two trees.
So
that dagger.
The destruction of the two trees was not the only thing that was happening, because the other thing that Morgoth, or Melkor, who is soon to be named Morgoth by Feanor, was doing was he was murdering Feanor's father and stealing the Silmarils and heading back to Middle Earth with. That resulted in the Oath of Feanor that said, death to anyone who would keep these Silmarils from us. And he kind of enslaved all of the Noldorian tribe to that oath. And so much so that this first event is the result of the oath, where Feanor is in a hurry to get to Middle Earth and start pursuing Morgoth to get his Silmarils back. And so he goes to another tribe, the Teleri, at the port of Alcolande, and says, hey, can I borrow your ships? I've got an errand I need to run. They say, the Valar have not approved any of this. You guys are out of control. You do not get our ships. Well, not to take no for an answer, Feanor starts to say, easier to ask forgiveness than permission, I guess, and starts taking their ships. And before you know it, they have a skirmish going on with swords and bows. And then Finarfin and his clan show up and they misrepresent. They figure, the Teleri are after our kinsmen, and they join in the battle. And all of a sudden, the first toxic fruit of that Oath of Feanor results in an elf on elf killing. It's called the first Elven Kinslaying. There are two more. I don't know if these are going to show up in our events. I don't think they do. So we get the Elven Kinslaying, the toxic result. It's almost biblical. It's a Cain and Abel kind of a story, where elves are killing one another, stealing their boats and heading over, and burning the ships once they get over to Middle Earth, so nobody else can use them, abandoning even the rest of the Noldor tribe, which is going to come up here in a second. And so it's a horrible event in the Kinslaying. That was,
it still kind of hurts that Tolkien even wrote that.
Yeah,
because there's always been this nobility and this spiritual awareness that the elves have always exhibited, especially the elves that we know in the late Third Age in the Lord of the Rings. But the fact that Tolkien actually conceived of something so horrible and so bad that would motivate elf on elf kinslaying, it still really kind of hurts that he wrote it. But there it is. He had that story to tell us, and there's a reason why.
Yeah, we get some pretty dark stories here in the early
Dude, Does anyone here think that Amazon would dare show the Kinslaying?
Yeah, sure. They should. If they're going to show us reasons why the elves have left Valinor, or reasons why the men of Numenor even want to go there, if they're going to show us all this back and forth in the late Second Age about why Valinor was so important, they better show us a lot of background and flashbacks, including these types of things. Why not?
I think also they can go much more into the fallibility of elves. The elves that we've seen in Peter Jackson's movies are these kind of untouchable characters, you know,
Right.
everything's very, very perfect and very, very regal. And yet Tolkien recognized, you know, they weren't divine beings. They were fallible in the same way as Jim said. It's kind of very biblical. We've made this creation that Iluvatar is excited about, and then oh no, actually they're fallible and they can turn on each other. And I suspect, who knows exactly what they'll show, but I suspect that the Amazon show is going to want to show us much more, if you like, rounded elves, that there's good elves and bad elves, that they're not all these kind of blissful, peace-loving, perfect.
Yeah, the other thing to realize here is, because we're starting in the pre-First Age, by the time we get to the late Third Age, the elves really have changed. And it's going to be rooted in the second event, which is the Doom of Mandos.
Yeah.
Because by the Third Age, we see elves that are weary and almost disassociated. They're leaving Middle Earth to go back to the Undying Lands. They're disengaged. Well, here in the pre-First Age, they are very engaged. They are very passionate. They are very about power. Galadriel wants a kingdom of her own. And so that kind of animating spirit is very much alive. And so the opportunity to see elves in really different lights and how they are going to approach this. So here, there's a whole tribe of elves that want nothing to do with any of this. The Ingwe's elves, and they stay in Valinor. We're not having any of it. The Noldor head en masse over to Valinor, or over to Middle Earth from Valinor. And so, and it's lots of mixed reasons. So there's a lot of drama to be explored.
So what's this Mandos thing? Because I think there was like a movie on a B movie called Mandos Have Hands of Fate or something like that. Does that have any?
Probably not what we're talking about here. Mandos is another of the Valar. He is the Lord of the underworld. He's the guy that oversees the halls of Mandos, which is where elves go when they die in Middle Earth. Because
like James Woods' character in that Disney movie.
Hades.
So you get a bit of a Hades component. The other thing that Mandos does is periodically he will be prophetic in uttering judgments on people. And he doesn't have a lot of sympathy. He's a pretty tough nut. And
he reminds me a great deal of one of the Neil Gaiman characters from the Sandman series called Destiny. And Destiny is completely aware of the doom to be foretold and all the fortunes that will befall everyone. And he's very, disconnected from it and in his judgments. Go ahead. I'm sorry to interrupt.
I remember this character, but here, after the Oath of Feanor, which was very proud, and especially the slaying of elf on elf, the Valar through Mandos are basically saying that's enough, and we are going to pronounce a doom on you, a judgment on you, which in essence says you are now going to be subject to death. You are now going to be subject to weariness. You are going to now be subject to the evils of creation in ways that you never have been before.
Mandos is telling this to elves?
Yes, he is absolutely saying to. And by the way, and when you die, because you're going to die, you're going to come to my halls and you're going to be there a long time. And even if the people that you slew are pleading for your release, I'm probably not going to be listening to you. It is a stern, utter warning and condemnation of what has happened. And the end of the Doom of Mandos says the Valar have spoken. So
it's Wow, sounds like some cancel culture going on against the elves there. So this is really a battle of elves dying. You know, elves killing themselves, or the Valar deeming them killable. I guess
or not able to die to an extent.
Yeah.
Because Mandos says, that they're going to grow weary. And this is what some people in the chat have been talking about, how the elves, by the time we see them in the Third Age, when I was talking about what they're like in the movies, for example, they've changed so much because they've lived for friggin' ages. And in the Doom of Mandos, he says, those that endure shall grow weary of the world as with a great burden. And so there's this idea, and it leads us to that thought of Tolkien talks about, the gift of men, that death is the gift of men, that not being able to die and just being sick of the burden of living in Middle-earth is perhaps a worse curse.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That is a very, very fascinating idea. And a lot of writers of speculative fiction have given a great deal of thought bent on that narrative, that immortality would create absolute weariness of existence.
Yeah, particularly since you're watching, if you get to know people not of your culture, they're mortal and they're going to die. Even the longer lived, the Numenoreans, their lives get shorter and shorter and they're going to die. The dwarves have a certain lifespan, but they're going to die. And the Ents are the only ones that have an equally long lifeline, but there's not a whole lot of them.
Yeah.
So it's like,
it's a little bit like when Bilbo, as he's possessing the ring, says his life is being spread too thin, like too much butter spread over too much bread. There's a little bit of that going on here with the elves too. You don't get to leave Arda, because in contrast to the gift of men, which is death, when you die, you get to go to the halls of Mandos and cool your heels for a really long time. And your life, and even if you don't die, your life is going to become weary. And that is some of the imagery that we see in the Third Age of the elves. There is a weariness. It's a fall. The leaves are falling down. Even the scene with Arwen outliving Aragorn, you get some of that pathos and some of that sadness. That is encased right here in the doom that Mandos is declaring.
Indeed. It's fascinating, Jim, that Peter and his team managed to touch on that aspect of it. I should say that perhaps Philippa and Fran, got Peter to tune into that aspect of it. It's just those are moments that I hope the writer's room at Amazon are going to lean into a lot. These spiritual concerns and metaphysical concerns of the destinies of both men and elves being so divergent from one another should be a lot of good material for storytelling, I believe.
All right. Well, let's wrap up the pre-First Age.
Yes.
First, Feanor's already taken the ships, but he's got a couple of tribes that are still under the Noldor, still under the children of Finwë. Specifically the children of Finarfin and the children of Fingolfin and their tribes, who are brothers to Feanor. And they're saying, we don't want to abandon them, but he's kind of left us without transportation. So there's only one other way to get to Middle Earth, which is the land bridge that still existed before the reshaping of Middle Earth, or of Arda, which is the crossing of the Helcaraxe, which is this giant broken pathway of ice slabs to the north of Middle Earth. It's kind of the land bridge between Aman and Middle Earth, and this host of elves decides we're going to cross it. And it takes them years, and a lot of them die. If you look really closely at Ted Matsmas, you can probably find Galadriel in there somewhere. I can't find her.
Wait, so Galadriel is part of crossing the Helcaraxe, and so is that what we see in the Amazon trailer?
We don't know that.
I mean, there's an ice thing going on, but I don't think that's the crossing that we see, is my hunch. But it's kind of an allusion to what's later happened.
Right.
So you've got in Year of the Trees 1497, the trees are dead, but we haven't had the sun and the moon appear yet, which is the second event. So remember, we talked about the fruit of Laurelin and the flower of Telperion. And Aule and his gang of Maiar come back and they say, hey, let's create some vessels for those things. And it turns into the sun and into the moon. The moon rises first, and 7 lunar days later, the sun comes up, and the year of the trees is now over, because the year of the sun, the years of the sun and moon. So this is the end of the year of the trees and the launch of the first age.
Who creates the sun and the moon?
So Aule is constructing them, but they are the fruit and the flower of the 2 trees. And so Ivana is connected with that, and Nienna, as we said earlier. So the remnants of those 2 trees, the last breaths of those trees become the brilliance of the sun and the beauty of the moon that we now see.
All right, I'm lost here. I don't know what to vote for. Sell me on one of these.
Well, the artwork gets me on the creation of the sun and the moon. I absolutely adore this. This would make an amazing stained glass window.
Yeah, and this artist, I think it's Gian Go, does a lot of these stained glass.
Yeah, they're beautiful. Yeah, I've seen them before, and this is stunning.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, it's got to be the sun and the moon here. The crossing of the Helcaraxe is important. Sure, of course it is, and a massive ordeal for the elves who undertake it. But without the creation and the sun and the moon, you have to wonder what would have become of Arda, what would have become of Middle-earth. Would men ever have awoken? Without new sources of light, could there have been any future? So for me, this is the most clear-cut one, that event is obviously vitally important, and therefore I would vote for that one.
Josh,
agree.
Josh, you're a teacher, and I don't know what you teach. Maybe you teach history. Is the Helcaraxe thing kind of like the Trail of Tears? Or are the elves being forced out of a land into another land? What's going on here?
Well, as far as what I teach, computer science. So
Wrong question.
But I would actually say the comparison between those 2 events is probably, makes some sense as far as, if you're using, apples to apples.
But the elves weren't being forced to go. Nobody was forcing them out of Aman at that time. It was
chose to go.
Right.
They chose to go, but there was only one way they could go. So it was the perilous journey wasn't their choice, but the choice to go was.
Right. Yeah. It's definitely not. Well, I shouldn't say it's not quite full apple to apple as far as comparison, obviously. But yeah, as far as.
But somebody mentioned in the chat, it was very interesting that Endeavour has been found recently, Shackleton's ship.
Yeah.
Because when they were trapped in the ice and had to set off on foot to try and make their way back, that was men, in the Victorian age or the Edwardian age for Shackleton, undergoing this kind of perilous journey across ice.
I like Green Dragon's logic in selling the creation of the sun and the moon, because that was like what I just did a few minutes ago on selling the so she's using the same logic on me, but at the same time I like the art in the crossing, so I'm like, that's a really nice art piece. So I'm leaning towards creation of the sun and the moon now, just simply because she used the same thought process that I did. I'm like, you know what? That sounds really good.
Let me introduce another metric for voting. All right, between Helcaraxe and Sun and Moon, let's have a show of hands. Which one do you want to see on screen in Amazon's show? Helcaraxe.
Yeah, Helcaraxe.
Which one do you want to see Sun and Moon? I'm not saying that's the only metric to consider, folks, when you're voting. Again, you can go to theonering.net, and there's links to vote. And if you click on one of the 4 buttons, we're wrapping up the pre-First Age bracket that you can see here, the top left. And then if you click on the link, you'll see the Common Ninja link, and then Vote Now is a little yellow button at the top left where you can cast your vote. Jim, do we have any more?
System for voting. It's really easy to use. To just click on your choices, and the extra information is there to help you in a pinch. So I want to say a big round of applause for all of the people who I probably don't even know all their names, who are all involved in putting that together. It looks really sweet. It's really nice.
You kind of do know their names because most of them are here right now.
I thought it was everybody right here.
And of course, Altera has been very involved in helping us put together the brackets, and she's written the post that'll go up tomorrow to summarize first and second age events. And of course, Kalisuri is always the man who actually makes the voting brackets and things for us. So we couldn't do without him. Listen, I'm going to have to bow out and leave you guys to venture into the first age. But for those folks who are watching tonight and are like, oh my God, there's so much information, I just want to remind you again that tomorrow there will be posts on the homepage, and we'll share them on Facebook as well, so that you can go over some of this info again. If you're still making your choices, you've got until Thursday night to decide who to vote on in the first round. And how you choose to vote, I love that Justin's throwing out different metrics for choice. Totally up to you. There's no right or wrong way how to make your choice. So if it's got to be dwarves all the way barking, then that's totally up to you.
And if nothing else, you can look at the overall bracket, because you can see, from each pairing what they'll break down into, and the winner will come against the winner of the other one. And so you can sort of also game out your voting by looking at what the next round will be presented with.
And I see somebody's just asked in the chat, can or should we vote for all first rounds in all 4 ages, aka all 4 brackets of the contest? Absolutely, but you don't have to vote for them all in one go. So if you're like, okay, now I've decided who I want to vote for in the pre-first stage, you can go and do that. But the 4 brackets have 4 separate voting buttons. So if you want to wait till later tomorrow after you've read one of Altera's articles about the events of the second age, for example, to vote on the second age bracket, you absolutely can do that. That's the beauty of this year's system, that yes, you should vote in all 4 brackets, but you don't have to do them all at once. You just have to do them before the end of the day on Thursday.
Before we lose Kirsten, just another thanks, because she's shepherded a lot of the process. And one point also to make is, these aren't the only 16. We thought about a lot more than just 16 things. And
yeah, we did.
we had a lot of bubble events, and each one of those ages, it didn't make it. So we're not going to go through these, but to let you know, anyone who says, well, why didn't you include? Well, we thought about those things. So the vagaries of our process, and Kirsten was really helpful at shepherding us, herding us cats in this direction.
Well, and that's also to Altera. She's the one that always does the Excel spreadsheet and puts the formula in so we can all vote and tabulate everything and stuff like that. Because we just throw all the spaghetti on the wall, and here's some of the spaghetti that fell off.
Yeah, so there were some bubble teams didn't make it. So
I know we'll have more Torn Tuesdays over the next couple of weeks to do with March Madness. And I guess, Justin, there's even a vague possibility that we might have extra bonus Torn not on Tuesdays to look at some of these like second round, third round that don't fall on Tuesdays. We'll see, but I'm just throwing that out there. I know we have in past years had pop-up live streams, so keep an eye out for that. And I hope to join for more. And I'm sorry I have to go now, but
Thank you for putting this together.
For everything.
Thanks for having me.
We're going to continue on, folks. Where this is a long show. Cliff, I know you're pressed for time too. You still got some time with us?
Just a few more minutes, but yes, I'm here for a moment. And I know that was very clumsy the way I was trying to acknowledge everybody, because I wasn't sure of everybody's names. But thank you, Altera and Kirsten, and of course Jim and Chris. Pirata, everybody helping out to make it happen. It's really lovely to see the results, because it's very polished. It looks great on the voting system. I love it.
Well, let's dive into the second bracket. Again, if you're looking at the main thing, we went through the top left quadrant. Now we're going to go into the first age quadrant, which is the bottom left. It's a whole different voting button on the website. And again, as far as like Amazon show, we don't know what they have rights to. Like, all we know is that they've shown the 2 trees, which is pre-First Age. We don't have any hints, or do we? That
Well, it's mentioned in the appendix, so that's the material they have the license for. So
is there anything in the First Age that you can think of off the top of your head that could be in the show?
there's quite a few mentions of stuff that are dropped into the appendices here and there. Quite a few things.
And you also get some references in the body of the story.
Yes.
Some of these First Age. So when Aragorn starts singing the Lay of Luthien, that's a First Age event. We're going to get to those things.
Mm-hmm.
Most of that content was put into the Silmarillion. And it's not, we don't get a timeline of the First Age like we do the Second and the Third Ages of Middle Earth. But
as far as it comes to Amazon, the absolute clarity that we have is if it is mentioned on paper in the Lord of the Rings in any capacity, in a passing comment, in a footnote, in the appendices, if it is mentioned, Amazon can tell you that.
A story, yeah.
So anyway, let's go in.
We'll dive in. I'll try to pick up the pace so we won't be here until
tick, 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 tick.
That's right. So here's the first matchup. The first one's obvious. It's kind of like what we had in the pre-First Age with the creation of Ea and Arda. Well, now we have the creation of the sun and moon. And when the sun rises, the second children of Iluvatar are awakened. Again, way in the east. And it's the awakening of men at the rising of the sun. First Age 1. And competing against that, when the elves get to Middle Earth, the Noldorian elves, they meet up with other beings, especially the elves that stayed back in Middle Earth and never made it over to the Undying Lands and Aman. And they all come together and actually have a great feast and decide, we do have a common enemy here. And they ally themselves against Morgoth. In some ways, it's a follow through on that Oath of Feanor, but it's also a recognition of the existential threat that Morgoth and his minions represent for them. So this is it's a good event. One of the
That's awesome. I know what I would vote for.
Which one is that, Cliff?
The elves actually coming together with some good plain Hobbit sense. When the elves have that moment and ally themselves, I think that's great. And
does anyone want to vote for men? I mean, men are weak.
I want to say I love you
Men
guys
are
so
not
much. And
weak.
thank you for joining us. But I got to split, and I wish I didn't have to split so fast. But time is of the essence. You guys have a great time talking about the categories, and we'll see you very soon and have more broadcasts very soon. Bye, everybody.
See you soon at WonderCon, if not
Yes.
before online.
At WonderCon, yes. Bye.
All right, bye, Cliff. Thank you, Kathy. You want to defend men?
Well, yeah, because the Third Age is as at the end of the Third Age, it's the time of men. So they sort of have to exist.
Okay. All right.
I mean, yeah.
All right. I'll just leave it at that. Well, hey, for people in the chat, you can see that we're down to 4 people. Thanks everybody. We're gonna keep going because we've got 64 groups to go in. Demosthenes, I see you. If you want to jump in, voice only, check your email. You've got the Zoom link. I'd love to hear your pretty voice. All right, Jim, continue.
Hey, yeah, the only other thing I'd say is back in that doom of Mandos, another part of that doom was that the men would increase and the elves would decrease. And so that's another argument because the men are on the scene. They might be weak, but they're going to outlast those elves. So here they come.
Pretty sure I heard something similar on Telegram. Anyway, continue.
I would also say I would say vote for the men because my favorite character is Aragorn. So if we don't get that event, I don't get my favorite character. So I think I'm gonna have to go with that because Aragorn's my favorite character.
Someone in the chat room says, and Aragorn is a man, Justin. Pause. Is that accurate? I don't think 100% man. He's not 100% man. Is he?
He's a Numenorean. I mean, he's descended of Numenor, but he's a man.
Is he 100% man?
No, he's got elvish blood in him because because he ultimately is a descendant through Elros and the Numenor.
That's what makes him great. So I think that the man part of Aragorn is
Which, interestingly, a complete
But you
aside,
got Eowyn.
it's also the reason that all of those film depictions of Aragorn that have him with a beard are wrong.
right. If all these people obsessed with beards right now, if you get mad at Aragorn's beard. Anyway, continue. What's the next matchup?
Match two. So what we're going to start seeing now is the intersection. You know, the pre-First Age was pretty much all about Valar and elves, and now and some dwarves. But now we're going to see how men and elves are going to start mingling. Initially, we've got this founding of Gondolin. One of Tolkien's great First Age stories is the founding and ultimately the fall of Gondolin, which we'll see in a later event. But here, this dude Turgon decides that his strategy against Morgoth is to isolate. And so he dreams of and finds this vale surrounded by mountains with very limited entrance and builds this amazing city called Gondolin. You'll see that come up, you know, when Gandalf and Bilbo find their swords in the caves, in the Troll's Cave. They're from Gondolin. And so this is the initiation of and the founding by one of the great Elven kings, Turgon.
And I just realized I misnamed the swords, that they were Elven made, not Dwarven made. Oops. And
then up against that is one of these Noldor who came, founded, he's Galadriel's brother, Finrod Felagund, and he founds another kingdom called Nargothrond. And he decides that he's going to actually start looking for a couple of Feanor's sons, and along the way runs into, for the first time, the children of men, particularly Beor the Old. And so that's the second event, is Finrod meeting and starting to teach and download all of the craft and the wisdom of elves to men, and then start forming the alliances between elves and men that is initiated here, First Age 310.
And the reason why Finrod is considered one of the most popular elves.
Right.
By the way, that's the one I'm voting for.
You're voting for Finrod.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, it's the first beginnings of friendships between men and elves. Whereas the other one is isolationism. I mean, it may be a great, awesome city, but it's still isolationism.
It ultimately doesn't stay isolated, and we won't get all of the events, but men actually find their way with Ulmo, the Vala of the Sea's help, to Gondolin.
And I'm obviously voting for Finrod as well, because that's who we see in this photo right here, the first image that Amazon released. That's Finrod looking at the two trees, which we just debated. And if you go to our Discord, search for the One Ring on Discord, you can join it. And we got Finrod emojis thanks to our wonderful moderating staff. So Finrod is just a wonderful character. I think I'm going to fall in love with Finrod because everything in the trailer with him looks awesome. All right, moving on. Next one.
Match 3. Now it's starting to get tough. The first one in round 3 is called the Dagor Bragollach, or the Battle of Sudden Flame. We discover for the first time things like the father of all dragons, Glaurung, and the existence of these demonic Maiar, the Balrog. And just when we thought we had Morgoth under control, we don't. And
oh my goodness.
And you get this battle of sudden flame
versus
an aftermath of that battle of sudden flame. Fingolfin, one of those early brothers of Feanor, decides he's had enough, so he comes riding up to Angband, Morgoth's great citadel, and challenges Morgoth to a single duel to the death, which seems like a ridiculous thing to do, and it turns out to be pretty ridiculous. He does wound Morgoth 7 times, including a wounding of his heel that becomes a permanent limp for a Valar, which is kind of wild. but he is far overmatched. But this is one of the prototypical. This is an iconic battle, a mano battle.
Who is Fingolfin?
Fingolfin is one of those early dwellers. He's one of Feanor's brothers. So he was one of the Noldor that crossed over the Helcaraxe, and is in effect is a king of the Noldorian elves. But he doesn't last that long.
Well, this gives me an opportunity to give you guys the latest Green Dragon gossip. Folks, the rumors are that this battle you see on the left, the Battle of Sudden Flame, we will see that in episode 1 of Amazon's show.
A flashback?
And in a flashback. And that is the scene where you see Finrod screaming. And the rumors are that there is the foot of a Balrog in the back of that shot, which narrows it down to this battle, the Battle of Sudden Flame. So you're telling me not only will we see a Balrog in battle with elves and everything else, we'll see Glaurung?
Could be. He's a source of flame for sure.
I can tell you if Amazon wanted to launch the most expensive series in history and establish itself bigger than Thrones could ever hope to be, and the biggest TV show in existence, showing that Battle of Sudden Flame with a Balrog and a dragon and all the elves, I mean, go big or go home.
Right out of the gate.
Now, one of the interesting factors about Glaurung is he is wingless. He's not like Smaug.
So he's a worm, right?
He's a worm, but he's a fire-breathing worm, and he's a tough one. So.
And he's supposed to be massive, isn't he?
Yeah. We'll see Glaurung again. So
we'll
there's
see if he can stack up to because we've already seen Smaug how big. So how much bigger must Glaurung be?
Yeah.
To dwarf Smaug.
Big.
I'm going to put a little more weight on this battle. If you vote in the first stage, if you vote for the Battle of Sudden Flame, we might have more Green Dragon gossip about that battle. But carry on. Let's move on to the next one, Jim.
Okay, match 4. Oh, sorry.
I just real quickly, Jim understands this because him and I have talked about this in my obsession with Balrogs. So I just want to state for the record that if there are Balrogs at any point in the Amazon show, that will probably be my favorite episode.
And I threw in this Jovan Darkart, the Balrog, just for you.
Balrog collectibles for it. I will have to buy those. Jim will get I got to take a picture of it, but and Jim's already knows about this because I was talking about that I was going to buy this, but I've bought the new Prime 1 Balrog versus Gandalf quarter scale diorama, and so
how big is it?
It's like it's huge.
It's quarter scale.
It was quarter scale. I was like, oh.
It's like they call it non-scale. Sorry to take this off key for just a second. It's like non-scale. So this thing is like, I mean, the Balrog himself is like huge. I mean, it's one of the bigger collectibles that I have and all the things that I have. It's huge. It's really, really huge. So I'm saying that to say that if I'm voting for this just because there's a Balrog involved, and if there's more Balrogs, sign me up for Balrogs.
So what you're saying is a Balrog is basically your border crisis. You're always going to vote for.
I'm going to vote Balrog. Voting Balrog every time. Every time.
All right, matchup 4. I told you
this is another tough one.
This is a really hard one. I told you Luthien would be back, and here she is in the first stage. She's well, and this will explain why she is possibly one of the most powerful elves ever. Forget that she's a woman elf. She is like the uber elf in this matchup. The first one is Beren meeting Luthien. Beren is out fighting the minions of Morgoth, and he's pretty weary and depressed, and miraculously he's able to penetrate into the woods of Doriath, which is protected by this girdle, by this protective shield that Luthien's mother Melian has erected. And yet fate or something allows Beren to break through, and he sees her dancing in the woods, and it's like love at first sight, immediate attraction. So this great romance, and in fact, it's one of the great romances of the First Age that Tolkien really extends on, the Way of Luthien. And so Beren and Luthien meet up in First Age 464. Luthien's father is not impressed. He says, you can't come near. I'll tell you what, here's the dowry. You bring me a Silmaril from the Iron Crown of Morgoth, then maybe I'll think about letting you marry my daughter. Which is, it's a Herculean, it's like a dismissal. Go find me an Infinity Stone if you want the Marvel Universe.
Yeah, and die while doing it.
Yeah. And so, this, we've already seen that Fingolfin couldn't handle that battle. How do you think you are? So Beren gets sent off on this impossibly ridiculous quest.
And Beren is a man, not an elf.
A human. That's right. So this is the first human and elven romance that we see in all of the Tolkien Legendarium. And when Beren meets Luthien and they fall in love together, it's kind of their doom. Beren goes off on this quest, and ultimately Luthien, who's put in a treehouse by her father and captured there, escapes. And it's almost a Rapunzelian escape, because she's got really long hair and it's magical, and she can hit people. It's a fascinating story. But Luthien escapes and joins up with Beren, and he turns into a dog and she turns into a bat, I think. I'm trying to remember. But they join up.
What is this? Castlevania Symphony of the Night?
It's an amazing story, worth reading. The event that we've got here is they ultimately make it to Morgoth's stronghold, where he's on his throne, and they confront Morgoth, and Beren is basically paralyzed, but Luthien starts dancing and singing, and through her powerful enchantment, she knocks Morgoth out. He literally falls off his throne unconscious. At which point, Beren is able to wake back up, turn out of his wolf form, grab this sword called Anglachel, and he digs out a Silmaril from the Iron Crown, and he's got it. And then he gets greedy and says, he's out. Why don't I get all three of them? And his sword breaks. Morgoth kind of wakes up, and they're dashing out. This particular picture is them trying to escape Morgoth's citadel. They meet this giant wolf called Karkaroth, and Beren gets his hand bit off, still clinging onto the Silmaril. But he did get it. And later on, when he goes back to Eru Thingol, Luthien's dad, he says, you don't get to marry her unless you've got a Silmaril in your hand. And he says, I do have it in my hand. I just don't happen to have the hand on me. But the hand is in the belly of this big wolf. And that's
wow. Okay, so this matchup is basically how it started and how it's going.
Yeah.
Oh my God, that's totally what this one is.
Yeah, this is meeting Luthien and earning Luthien is what's going on. So I don't know which one to vote for. The chat room seems to be leaning toward the story of the Silmaril, because there's just a lot more going on, and there's a sacrifice involved in the Silmaril and earning Luthien. So it's I don't know. Does anyone in this group vote for love at first sight? Or
well, what I like about that, because it's obviously paralleled to Arwen and Aragorn meeting for the first time, but as Jim brought up, the fact that she's in a glade that's protected by that spell that Melian casts and stuff like that. So the fact that he's able to get in, you're right. What is it? Is it fate or something like that that brings them together, or some sort of special? Is he an elevated human that we just don't know, but that allows him to get in where he shouldn't have been able to get in? So I kind of like that aspect, that if you're fated to be, magic isn't going to hold back love.
Yeah. Well, and the romance story of Beren and Luthien is almost autobiographical. I told earlier that Luthien was on the tombstone, and Tolkien's name that he appropriated is Beren. And so it's
Yeah.
a Luthien thing. If you've seen the movie Tolkien, which is an embellished biography, you understand that the accessibility, the love at first sight, the denial, and the deferral that went on, sort of the magical coming back together prior to Tolkien being deployed in the First World War. There are elements of that same inaccessible but ultimately fulfilled passion and love at first sight. The great romance is captured there.
Jim, before we move on to the next one, speaking of love at first sight, people in the chat want to know, are you single?
No, I am not single. I've been married.
He has a wife, of course.
Wait, how many years?
I've been married for 40, coming up on 42 years.
Oh my God, congratulations. This is just wonderful.
To my Rosie. Yeah.
Well, people want to get to know you better. You're on Twitter, right? They can follow you.
Yeah, I'm Mad Eye Gamgee on Twitter. So yeah.
All right, carry on.
Okay, so matchup 5, more sadness. So the doom of Mandos is coming true. In fact, the battle of unnumbered tears, the Nirneath and Oediad, how you pronounce that, was the first words out of Mandos's mouth on his doom. You will have tears unnumbered. And so we see that, and this is even worse than the sudden flame battle, because the elves think we've got Morgoth on the run, and it just turns it. So this Ted Natsmith image is like a pile of bodies. It is so devastating to the Noldor. It's the reason why Turgon said, I am hiding, because this dude Morgoth is just too strong for me. So it is a highly depressing battle. There's not a lot of joy or victory out of the battle of unnumbered tears. But there's just escape from it.
Wow.
After that battle, again, we see Glaurung, and he's kind of released. So increasingly, Morgoth is getting a free reign over Middle-earth generally, and in the northern parts, the Beleriand area that is the focus of many of the stories. And we see Glaurung, the dragon, is released to invade deeper into the former Elven territories, and he invades West Beleriand, and he comes and he attacks and sacks this great Elven stronghold of Finrod Felagund called Nargothrond. Again, not a happy story. He's the guy in this scene is Turin Turambar, and he gets bewitched, and he's given awful choices, and the whole story of the children of Hurin gets tied in to this tragedy, and it's all rooted in, Glaurung does more than spit flame. He is bewitching, and he's evil, and warping these stories in a very Greek tragedy kind of a way, which starts with this sacking of Nargothrond by Glaurung.
Well, the chat room is pretty unanimous in voting Nirneath and the Battle of Unnumbered Tears on this one. As much as we love dragons, the Nirneath has the vote. Hey, before we move on, again, I'm sorry to put you on the spot, Jim, but 42 years, that means you know the meaning of life, the universe, and everything.
That's right, because the answer is 42.
So, any wisdom to impart on us?
There you go.
A towel?
Bring a towel. That's always a good idea. It's just communicate, and stay patient, and yeah.
Oh my God.
I love Tolkien's love story a lot. For me, it gets represented best. I mean, the Aragorn Arwen thing is good, but for me, the Sam and Rosie thing is really good. I mean, that's where the
That's why you guys cosplay that.
We do. We've done it in New Zealand, in the Hobbit.
Yep.
Wow. All right, continue on.
All right, here we go. Round matchups, match 6. Good news and bad news. The good news is that Glaurung is actually defeatable. And Turin, who was bewitched by Glaurung and set on this terribly tragic path, decides to go after him and is able to slay him. Turin hides in this deep valley, the cleft of it, and waits for Glowring to cross it. He's so big that he kind of bridges valleys. And when he's at his most vulnerable point, he basically just stabs him in a very vulnerable area. And Glowring is ultimately slayed, not before Turin is kind of overcome by the spilled dragon blood, and he gets passed out. And Turin is married to this woman who turns out to be his sister. And it's almost like Romeo and Juliet, because she wakes up after Glowring's dead and the bewitchments is gone and says, I've married my brother and he looks like he's dead. I think I'll throw myself off of the cliff and into the river. And so she does that. Turin wakes up and says, what has happened? I think I'll kill myself with my sword, which he does. So it's a real,
Wow.
But Glowring's dead. So that big threat from one of Morgoth's chief instruments of dominance is taken off the board by Turin finally. Well,
is that like the Shroud of Turin that my parents kept telling me about?
No.
Not quite. I don't know. I haven't researched the semantic undergirding of why we get Turin and Tuor, these two brothers or these cousins. But yeah.
And then what's the fall of Gondolin? Are we getting that in the show?
I don't know. We saw the creation of Gondolin, and Turgon thought he was safe, but he wasn't safe from treachery. And so we get another elf, I think his name is Meglin, who turns out to betray the secrets, because Morgoth has been searching everywhere for this hidden kingdom and is unable to find it despite all of his spies. But treachery is what finally opens up the location of Gondolin. And then Morgoth sends everything after it. And so we've got Balrogs, we've got, so there you go, Josh.
But not Glaurung, because he's now dead.
We have a different dragon on this picture.
We have lots of other dragons. In fact, this is it's kind of a steampunk Tolkien, because at one point, Tolkien writes about mechanical dragons. So he's playing with this minds of wheel and metal and overcoming nature sorts of images. But ultimately, Glaurung and many uber characters like Turgon himself is killed. Ecthelion, who is a really terrific elf, is killed. Glorfindel, who we will see again. I guess he got released. And Tolkien was always fiddling with the stories. But one theory is Glorfindel gets killed by killing the Balrog Gothmog. But he goes to the halls of Mandos, and I guess
Gothmog is the white orc.
He stole a name, because initially the Gothmog was the name of a Balrog here in the first age.
Balrog. Gothmog's a Balrog.
Yeah, he's like the king of the Balrogs.
King of the Balrogs. That's
what?
Right.
And then I got to ask, you mentioned Ecthelion.
Yep.
Because isn't one of the towers?
Yeah, so we see those names recycled. And the White Tower of Ecthelion is connected to one of the stewards of Gondor.
That's what I thought, yeah.
Maybe one of the kings of Gondor. And so you do see some trade-off between...
Where is Gondolin?
Gondolin is
hidden away.
In the middle of Beleriand. It's kind of north of Doriath.
Give me something Third Age I can set. I know.
It's underwater in the Third Age. You will not find it on the map that we are most familiar with. And we're coming to that. Wait for...
Is it in Numenor then? Somewhere on Numenor, the island?
No. It's in this land of Beleriand, and we'll come to that. Wait.
Okay.
Catch up.
Okay. All right, we'll get there.
We're getting. Right. But Gondolin is overwhelmed, and many. It was the last real stronghold left to the elves, and now it's in ruins. There are some folks who are able to escape, specifically Tuor, who's another man. He was the cousin of Turin, and he also married an elf in Gondolin named Idril. And they have a son whose name is Eärendil. And that actually was a flashpoint for much of Tolkien's creation, because he read that name and felt like he started to have to write books that explained that name. So we get the offspring, Eärendil, in effect, the half-elven or the half-human, who's the offspring of Idril and of Tuor. They are able to escape.
Okay, so I've got the Amazon map up on screen here.
Yeah.
And well, I was going to. So is Beleriand on this Second Age map?
No, it's gone by then.
Where is it supposed to be?
It's actually to the west in the ocean of the map that you are looking at.
North of Numenor?
It would be northeast of Numenor.
Northeast. So like Tol Morwen and Tol.
Numenor is not on the map yet either.
It is. It's on the
No,
map.
not in the first stage. Remember, right now we're in the first stage.
Oh, that's right. Okay. Oh, so but Beleriand's
Numenor-
just.
Yeah.
We'll get there too, because Numenor rises later.
So here we go. Let's close out the first stage with these next two rounds. The first thing is Erendil, that guy that escaped from the downfall of Gondolin, meets up in a southern seaport called Syrian, I think it's Syrian, and marries Elwing, who is the granddaughter of Beren and Luthien. One of the events that didn't get on here, Beren and Luthien die back when they got the Silmaril, and it was awful. And they end up in the halls of Mandos. And yet again, Luthien, unlike anybody else, has the power to talk Mandos himself into sending both of them back, which is unheard of. Mandos is not a patient or a forgiving or a pliable guy. And yet both Beren and Luthien are in effect reborn and take up residence back in southern Beleriand. And then they have a son named Dior, and Dior marries, and they have a daughter named Elwing. So Elwing and Erendil marry, and they're the parents of this dude named Elrond and his brother Elros.
Which one's the elf and which one's the the other?
They're both half. So we've got Erendil, who's the offspring of an elf and a human. And then you've got Elwing, who is a granddaughter of Dior, who is a Beren and Luthien child. And Luthien is part Maiar through Melian and part elf. And it's complicated. You can search there. Somebody has calculated the percentages. It's not 50-50, but you have both Elrond and Elros, who ultimately, because of these mixed heritages, Manwë, who's kind of the Jupiter or the Zeus of the Tolkien Valar, gives them the option of choosing whether they're going to become men or elves. And ultimately, that's going to play out as we see it into the Second Age, because Elros chooses to be an elf, or Elrond chooses to be an elf, and Elros chooses to be a human.
Do they have to wait till they're adults before they can make the choice, or?
When that happens, that's a great question.
Yeah, because it's not something you would expect a 3-year-old to be able to make. It's like there had to be a certain age that they would consider the age of consent, I would think, for something like.
Well, yeah, or do they know from a young age where they lean toward? I mean, this gets into some very heavy conversation.
That would be for some other time.
The question I want to know is, do you think, based on what you've seen in the Amazon trailer and how young Elrond looks, do you think Elrond and Elros have made that decision?
By then, yes, I do. By the Second Age, absolutely. And
the time in the show, I mean, time is a construct, right? But based on just what you've seen in the trailer, do you think Elrond has made his choice?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, he would have had to. Because Elros was basically a man, because he becomes the first king in Numenor.
Yeah.
Okay, and then what we're back on Beleriand here for the matchup. What is this?
So here we go. The War of the Wrath comes. So the Valar have had enough. So far, they have been staying in Valinor. And Morgoth had, the Battle of Unnumbered Tears and the breaking of Glaurung into West Beleriand. It's just going horrible. And the elves look like they are about to be completely overwhelmed and destroyed. Particularly the elves that have gone over to Valinor and seen the two trees. They're the biggest threats. And Morgoth blames them for his being thrown into the halls of Mandos. So he has a particular beef against the elves. And he is absolutely winning, and the Valar have enough. That introduces this thing called the War of Wrath.
Whose wrath?
Of the Valar's wrath against against Morgoth. And so now we have elves, men, dwarves. I don't know that there are any Ents involved in this thing. And the Valar themselves are showing up to battle against this rebel Vala, Melkor Morgoth, and put an end to him. And it is such a violent and a destructive battle that the entire shape of Middle-earth is transformed, particularly the land of Beleriand, all of this country that has been the venue for all of the events of the First Age, gets sunk under the sea. And you get, it's like, everywhere from about Colorado west falls into the sea. And we have a new coastline. It's kind of like a Superman movie plot line. It is literally a transformation of Middle-earth into a new landform. And that big lake where the elves woke up, that gets drained off, and we get the Sea of Run and the Sea of Nurn in Mordor. Now, Mordor rises up. So all kinds of things that we're most familiar with in the Third Age of Middle-earth, Misty Mountains and where things are, that happens because of the reshaping of Middle-earth in this War of Wrath. And Beleriand, this land, gets destroyed and overwhelmed by the ocean.
So do you think that, but I want to bring it back to the TV show. Again, this isn't the only metric that you can vote for. This is just where I'm at. Comparing it to Peter Jackson's movies, where we see this big epic battle, at the foot of Mount Doom, and we see it, like the prologue to the Lord of the Rings movies. Basically has the big battle. Is this the equivalent for
what you saw in Lord of the Rings? Was like 5-year-old T-ball compared to this major league battle that's going on here.
But would this battle be an appropriate prologue setup for Second Age antics?
It could be, because one of the things that happens, and this I'll move on to match 7, because this is the end of Morgoth, at least for now. He is ultimately defeated. He is rooted out, and he is cast into the void. The void is, what exists outside of all of the created universe. And again, we get that chain that shows back up, and Tulkas shows back up, and Morgoth is exiled. He is no longer in the picture. But what is not, the person who's not exiled is Sauron, or all of his Balrogs, and a few dragons are still left over.
So this is kind of, if we're going to draw from mythology, we've got Mount Olympus and all of the gods joining up with all the humans, all of the demigods, all of that going up against
the Dark Lord,
the Dark Lord, plus dragons and Balrogs and whoever, Ungoliants and spidery things and horrible, yucky things.
All the collectibles that Josh will.
And so it's not just like mortality or things like that, because it's almost god powers as well. So you've got god powers and.
That's right.
Yeah.
God powers at work. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly right. And so Sauron's still around. He's going to linger, and that's how we get the Second Age stories. But the other thing that happens at the end of this First Age is that the Valar create this new island. The island is actually called Elena, and some other names, and it becomes where the kingdom of Numenor was founded. And so it's a gift. It's sort of a redemptive component of this great destruction that happens. But now the Valar raise up Numenor, that island of Elena, and ultimately those men who were aligned with the elves in their fight against Morgoth are blessed not only with a home that's protected, kind of far away from the influences of the remnant of evil, but they're given extra long lives, and that's where we get Elrond's brother Elros becomes the first king of Numenor, which will get us into the Second Age.
Do you think, Josh, either of these things will be in the prologue, episode 1 of Amazon show?
I definitely I could definitely see, the War of Wrath being in there, just because. I mean, I think it's.
Do you think we'll see the creation of Numenor?
Yeah, I think I would expect to see that. I think the reason I think like the War of Wrath would be in there is because for the same reason that Peter Jackson included the sequence that he did, the Battle of the Last Alliance. I think that's it. You need sometimes you need moments like that, if nothing else, just to kind of it gives more importance to certain things and where things are going to go with the movies. You saw that, you saw Sauron, you saw him defeated, the ring stayed around, and obviously that leads into obviously the rest of the movies. With this, you can see this, and then if they depending on how they want to handle it, with like what Jim said, with the fact that the different maps that we've seen of Middle Earth, you could do something graphically where like you have Middle Earth just like a bunch of it just fall into the water and just almost create just this massive waves and all kinds of cool stuff that they can do, Amazon can do with their amazing computers and stuff. And then it reshapes Middle Earth more into what we know. You get the Numenor being raised from the ocean. You get the Misty Mountains coming up. You can start forming things and tying it into. I know they have to play fast and loose with the films, and I get all that, but it can tie it into the films in a way that still allow they don't get in trouble. But for people that really want it to be still worked with the films, it's just a way of tying it together. So mentally, yeah, that's how I could see them going about doing something like that, if that makes sense.
Well, and I see it as sort of, you kind of have to have a history of, obviously, I don't know if you're going to get the song and the creation of, the Valar and stuff like that, but we've obviously seen the two trees. So I think we are going to get that land that the elves came from. I think, we sort of have to get that whole history and the migration of the elves back and forth, and some of the key battles. I mean, if that Battle of Sudden Fire is in it, I mean, that's one of the various battles, because you don't get the War of Wrath if you don't have a Morgoth. And why are they fighting if you don't see the what is it, the Battle of the Tears or whatever, the unending tears? I mean, if you don't see some of that and see the stakes of what the elves are fighting against, you don't get that final big, huge Battle of Wrath. And without that, you don't get Beleriand sinking and Numenor rising and the whole creation of the Middle Earth, the new map as we see it. I mean,
all right, let's go back a slide, Jim, because I want to ask you guys, everyone here, which one of these two deserves to go to the Final Four?
Well, maybe some of the other things that came before are going to the Final Four. We'll see.
Well, out of these two, which one deserves to move forward?
You like continuity and the hopefulness of how we're this is another example of what Sam talks about in terms of we're in the same story still. And so this Arundel and Elwing, and the fact that we're seeing Arundel still riding Vengelot with the Silmaril at his prow, there's an enduringness to the first one. But
okay. Well, we're gonna let everyone vote at theonering.net. That is the first age. Now we've done pre-first age and first age.
Back up to match 8, just to also make a decision on these two, because Morgoth, bye-bye. I'm going to say I love the idea of seeing Numenor rise up, because inevitably I think we're also going to see Numenor sink.
Right, yeah.
I kind of love that.
That's a nice bookend. So you can vote. You can vote for first age or pre-first age if you feel you're informed enough. Queen Mel, don't leave us. I know you're falling asleep. It's probably 3 a.m. in your time zone. I don't know where you are, but we've got 2 more ages to go. The second age is what
Luckily,
Amazon show is about.
The third age is going to be easy because everyone's familiar with it.
One quick shout out. These are for people that collect things other than, figures and stuff. For the calendar collectors out there, the 2023 Tolkien calendar is going to feature Kip Rasmussen as one of the artists and Jenny Dolphin as another one of the artists.
And Donata Giancola.
Yeah.
He's got 3 in there, including the cover.
We're going to see some wonderful new artists, and I try to grab some of their stuff so you can get exposed to it. But just a shout out. Okay.
Good on you, Jim, for doing that.
There are some other bubble events that didn't get into this, so Gil-galad, for example, pretty popular, but
yeah, Gil-galad's got a major place. Gil-galad's got to show up in some of the second age stuff.
Okay.
Well, he is. He's kind of like the king.
Second age.
Yeah.
Match 1. Elros and his Edain, the children of men, nobility, arrive and reach. Takes them a while to get there. They get collected up, but they are deposited and build the kingdom of Numenor on the island of Elena. So that's one of the initiating events in the second age. Again, and now we're back into the territory. Josh's question: what will we see in the Amazon series, and how soon will we see it? You heard Cliff say earlier that the suspicion is the focus will be on the events toward the end of the second age, and we'll get there. But here early on, we could see at least some snippets of stuff going on. Elros and men arriving on Numenor, and the dwarves are on the move. We already had Khazad-dûm, where Moria founded, but now, because of the destruction of Beleriand, there is a migration of a whole new set of dwarves that are going to head and swell the ranks of dwarves in Moria and Khazad-dûm.
Cool.
I really hope that Amazon treats dwarves as an equal class citizen as far as like screen time and stuff like that. Like Peter Jackson's movies, obviously we got a lot of Hobbit stuff. The prologue is all elves and men, but we don't know the rise and fall of Dwarven civilization at all. So I'm excited. That's what I'm most excited about this show. Josh, who are you voting for on that first one?
I mean, I have to kind of stick with what I said earlier. I'm going to have to go with the migration of dwarves to Moria and Khazad-dûm. I mean, just from a visual, in some ways for me, it's kind of still goes to the movies. Just that visual, how that looked on screen. There we go. I'll say it. Apparently, I can't say the other word tonight. You think I get paid to talk for a living? You think I could do this? But when they got to Moria in the films and what Jackson put on screen, that's one of those sequences for me personally that really grabbed me and pulled me in. Like, I want to know more about what's going on because it just was so beautiful to see. So that sequence really is kind of one of those special feeling sequences. So anything going with the dwarves going to Moria and dealing more with what happened there in the fall of it and how they did delve too greedily and create, wake up the Balrog and all that kind of stuff. I really find that really fascinating. I mean, of the cultures that aren't related to men and Gondor and that lineage, which is, that's probably my favorite. I really enjoy the dwarves and what they and that, especially that part of it. Just because I don't know, the elves always kind of seem standoffish to me a little bit. So I was
before we move on.
I was just going to say real quick, and I cannot wait to see Dwaro Delelf populated and to hear echoes of Howard Shore's theme of, when Gandalf first lights up the halls of Dwaro Delf. I can't wait to see it populated and hear more of that music in that grand space. That's going to be fabulous, but I'm voting for Numenor.
And I will say, I hope the Amazon show shows a lot of what happened in Moria and touches upon that. But also, I hope it makes Weta want to do another Moria environment from Lord of the Rings, because I have that one. It's great, but you have to stand above it to look and see everything. I need something bigger, more detailed, so I can retrace the steps and that kind of thing. So hopefully the show will help out.
Jim, before we move on, is this a typo? Is Moria and Khazad-dûm redundant? Aren't that the same thing?
I think Khazad-dûm is more of the capital or the city component of it. Moria is more of the general location. So, but they are pretty similar. They tend to get used synonymously.
Is that like Washington, D.C., Washington?
Could be, but no, District of Columbia and Washington, D.C., maybe.
Okay, fair.
I think that the founding of Numenor is going to be pretty unstoppable in this round, but we'll see.
Yeah, well, plus seeing Elrond's brother.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, who doesn't want to see the rest of the family at some point?
All right, matchup 2. One of the other things, and it's about 1,000 years into the Second Age, is I told you Sauron was still around, and now he's going to start establishing himself. So one of the things that happens is that he builds Barad-dûr in Mordor. So he's establishing his kingdom there. Another huge event that's happening, and it gives the name to the Amazon series, is the crafting of the Rings of Power by this dude Celebrimbor, who is being counseled by Sauron in another form named Anatar, he's learning this craft of creating rings of power, 7 for the dwarf lords, 9 for the mortal men. We'll see another event coming up where we'll focus specifically on the elven rings, but this is part of the seduction and part of this power game that's going on as Sauron tries to find a way to focus his controlling energy in new ways beyond and indifferent from what his sire and what his former uber boss Morgoth was up to. So we start seeing the rings get formed, and Sauron is building his mighty tower.
Yeah, he proves to be much more sneaky, whereas Melkor was just brute force. Sauron is sneaky.
Yeah, and we'll see more sneakiness later in the age.
I hope that the forging of the Rings of Power by Sauron and Celebrimbor is very erotic. Okay, moving on.
Moving on. More ring forging.
I was going to chime in, but I don't know how you do that after that comment. So
we'll just move on.
How do you vote between these two?
So we've got Elven rings or the Ring of Power. So Elven rings, we know that Sauron never was involved in. He never touched them. And there are 3 of them. And so they are completed in this region of Eregion. And then in around Second Age 1600, about halfway through the Second Age, Sauron forges the One Ring to rule them all and find them and bind them. So familiar events for us. We've seen images. Obviously,
the Elven rings are made without Sauron's knowledge.
Correct. Yeah, he doesn't know they're made, but they were made using the teachings that he gave to Celebrimbor, which is why the One Ring is able to control them, is because they were used or made in the same manner.
Right. And that's why the theory is, the minds are still hidden from Sauron. And they have different kinds of capabilities around protection and wisdom and forecasting and so on. But they're still controlled, like the Tolkien poem says, by the One Ring that is ruling them all, which is why at the end of the Third Age, when the One Ring is destroyed, the power of those even 3 Elven rings wanes. It's the power switch has been turned off.
Josh, what do you vote for?
I mean, to me, I think you almost have to vote for Sauron forging the One Ring. I mean, that literally is the catalyst for
everything else.
I mean, it is when I was looking at the the brackets before the show started, when we posted our article, I'm like, how do you not vote for that one? And looking at it, was kind of like, well, I would vote for that one if it was matched up against something else, because there's importance obviously that goes with that. But the forging of the One Ring, if Sauron doesn't have the One Ring, we don't have the Battle of the Last Alliance. Isildur doesn't have the ring. It doesn't get passed on. Yeah, it doesn't stay in the leg. Gollum doesn't get it. It does, it's just the literal chain of events, the dominoes that fall because that ring gets created. It could literally be the most important thing in this whole tournament.
No, is this a final four that we're one of the final four? Maybe the Elven right
and the fact that the Elven Rings have to go up against this in the first round that's a pretty. I mean, that's like, hey, who are we playing? Oh, Duke, great.
Whereas I'm looking at the 3 Elven Rings and I'm like going, well, Celebrimbor is like going, oh, sure, I will do your commission work, i.e. 9 rings for men, 7 rings for dwarves. And then I'm going to come over here and I'm going to do it in secret because the elves, we need something too. We want our own.
And Justin obviously talking about watching Celebrimbor make the rings. I want that. I'm looking forward to seeing that on screen, because the only time we've gotten to mess with it at all, and if you guys haven't played the Shadow of War games at all, you get to see that sequence in the game. You don't play that moment, if I remember. It's just a quick visual, so it's not long in the game, but you see that there. I would love to see it, on the screen while I'm, and be able to see it in that way with, people acting out these roles and stuff like that, because it's just a moment that when you read in the books, you have a character that doesn't have any, and so you're making it up. And I'd kind of like to start to create as I've talked about before, my own mind movie, and be able to have some of this little column A, a little column B, and make my own mind movie, and it all works together. So I'm really looking forward to seeing, him
a bunch of rings.
Yeah.
My final comment on this one is this competition is brought to you by theonering.net. Vote accordingly.
But the TV show is the Rings, plural, of power.
Rings of Power. That's right. We'll see.
So,
next.
Yep, next.
So yeah, again, back to the collectible.
That one's going to be to the people. That's
The people, you will find lots of collectibles from the Second Age that are replicas of these rings. So,
I'm sure, yeah.
Match 4. Elrond, in a move to create a more protected space, given the rise of Sauron and his concerns, builds the Refuge of Imladris.
Are you telling me that Elrond is such a softie he has to build a safe space?
He did. Well, that's an interesting thing. Kind of the powers of good and evil. In most fantasy, it's easier to write, how strong evil is. It's harder to depict the strength of a refuge, or the strength of what.
Well, in The Hobbit, it's the last homely place.
Right.
And so it's a refuge for travelers. Yeah. It's where Bilbo went.
Right.
And it's up against the creation of the Ringwraiths.
The Ringwraiths arise. They have been now corrupted. They've had the rings for a while, back in 1600. So they've had them for about 600 years now.
Are they dead and they have arisen?
No, they are consumed.
Is this like Theoden was consumed and he just started turning old?
I think
it's more like Gollum.
It's where Gollum was headed. It's in some ways it's a little bit like the mouth of Sauron, but he doesn't have a ring. But it is a hollowing out, an emptying of these souls into a wraith form.
I'm so interested in the lore behind the wraiths and the rings, and
I want to see the distribution. I mean, I can't wait to see, because we're not going to just see him. We can't just see them making the rings and then here you go. We've got to go meet these cultures that they come from. I mean, at least a couple of them. I don't know if we'll have time to meet all 9 of them, but we've got to meet a couple of them, where you're like, is he going to do it? Or is it going to be his brother who's going to get the ring? I mean,
And so we've seen the corruption of the One Ring on the possessors of it in various forms, but we're going to potentially get to see the corruption of these 9 rings of power on men and their descent into from human to wraith, and the temptations and the power struggles. And I'm almost certain that we will see the Witch King.
And I'm curious to see how as they get essentially dissolved a physical form by the rings, the process that goes on through the makeup department, whether or not Weta's involved with that, or Amazon's got their own crew, or whatever the case is, how they show that, because we know what they look like when Frodo puts on the ring, and we go into the Wraith world for a second, we see what they look like at that point, but to actually see that from through the show is going to be really neat, to where they're basically, I mean, just as I talked a second ago, where like basically their outer physical form is gone, and the only way you can see a physical form is literally by them wearing these cloaks, because you can't see their physical form with your natural eye anymore. The only way you can see it is with the ring. So that whole sequence is going to be really interesting, I think, just from tying both the show and the films together. I think it's going to be an interesting.
Well, and it's also going to be interesting to see if they have obviously a transition when they're first given the ring. I mean, because the rings are made before he's made his controlling ring.
Right.
So the rings just give them power, which they will start to use. And you got to see if that's going to start corrupting them, or if it's not until he puts the One Ring on that the corruption part starts.
Right.
To see, because with this timeline, it's like going, well, gee, did somebody die and maybe pass it on to a second or third, to a son or a grandson? Or are the Ringwraiths all the original receivers of those rings before, the Wraith?
Is anything in the text, is there, Jim, that says they were passed on? Not that I remember off the top.
No.
So I would imagine that it would be the original owners, but that would be interesting if they. Here's an interesting twist if they change that up a little bit.
Yeah.
Here's the thing: that the rings are going to be given, I think, on 2 basic promises to men. One is power, which has always been Sauron and even Morgoth's, control and power and exerting it over all life, kind of a deal. And so I think part of the promise is going to be, this will make you more powerful. You'll be able to control more territory. You'll be stronger in battle. Those kinds of things. But the other thing that they will be promised is the great temptation of men, and that is the prolongation of life.
Yes.
They will be given the opportunity. They will be told, you will not die if you take this ring, and that will be tremendously tempting. And for that reason, I don't see any of them giving up those rings ever, because the minute I take it off and get rid of it, now I think.
And then you're going to start to see the problem like Gollum had, where you're going to see them because they will live. But
they'll find out.
The wife won't.
Yeah, but
the children will grow up.
They'll find out all of the downsides of deathlessness.
Yeah.
Death is called the gift of men, not the curse of men. And we're going to see this later with Ar-Pharazôn, because that is the constant temptation. I want to figure out how not to die.
Yeah.
And so for the ring race, they get the rings, and I don't have to die. And then they find out, I'm being emptied, and everyone I love and everything that is meaningful in my life is being eaten away. For later on, I don't want to die, so I'm going to attack the Valar. That's coming up later in the second.
Again,
that's
folks,
going to be fascinating.
Again, folks, you can vote on all of these at theonering.net, and I will say that there is no qualifier. There is no qualifier for how you should vote or anything. You can vote on the lore alone. You can vote on the quality of the art and what has been depicted. I mean, some people here in the chat are voting strictly along lines of the art that is being displayed. And you can also vote that, like I am, on what I want to see in the TV show. So if we go back one slide, I'm going to vote for Ringwraiths, even though, the trigger reaction is like everyone loves Rivendell. Rivendell was the most beautiful part of Peter Jackson's movie. So of course I'm voting for the Rivendell. But for me, I want to see an Amazon show the ring race, the creation of the ring race, the corruption of the ring race, how they do their horses start white and turn black with them. Like there's so much stuff I want to know with the ring race. So there's no qualifier on any of this. You can vote however you want. Jim, carry on.
Yeah, I mean, and we said that before. You're going to vote according to your own passions, and what you want to see. And for some, Rivendell is compelling, not just because it's a cool place, but because of everything that it represents. So yeah.
Singing elves, fa la 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 la.
Here we go. Match 5. This is more subtlety of Sauron first. Sauron, we are now into the late stages of the Second Age, the 3300s. And this dude named Ar-Pharazôn has become the king. And there's a lot of politics and a lot of intrigue that could go into that story. We may see some of that. I suspect we will. But one of the things that happens is that the men of Numenor send this huge army to join up with the elves against Sauron, and they defeat him. And defeat is in scare quotes for a reason on this particular matchup, because what happens is they decide that they're going to take Sauron captive, and will bring him back in captivity to the island of Numenor. And then bad things really start happening, because Sauron weasels his way into the councils. You think Wormtongue was bad? Wait till you have Anator Sauron at giving you political advice, and they build this temple of Morgoth on the great mountain in the center of Numenor. It's one of the only temples you ever see in all of Tolkien's Legendarium, and it's evil. And ultimately, it is an insidious. It's almost like a ring, except it's Sauron himself who is infecting the entire clan of Numenor, except for the faithful. Elendil, Isildur, Anarion. There is a faithful remnant, but a seduced majority, because Sauron's been defeated. And now he's going to go help the Numenoreans into whatever their next stage is, which is the second matchup. Because
that first part, that last thing you just said reminds me of, reminds me of America. A lot of people, only the good. I don't know. Tolkien didn't want any allegory or applicability to anything modern. So
there was applicability, not allegory, but yeah.
Yeah, so I do think that there's going to be things in this show that feel familiar, and we just have to remember that Tolkien was just writing a universal story, we're going to continue to see applicability and which one is good and which one is bad, Jim?
Well, Tolkien was going for applicability, not allegory. He's not trying. Allegory is saying, the ring is the nuclear bomb, and that was never part of Tolkien's equation. But the idea of power and corruption and hollowing out, and so there are reasons why these themes keep coming back, and they resonate from age to age and from culture to culture. I think the Tolkien fandom is the most diverse fandom that I know. It is diverse in culture, it's diverse geographically, it's diverse in age. It's incredible. And I think it's because the stories he's telling are so relevant.
Do you think this Sauron defeated and brought to Numenor, it kicks off the series? Do you think we see that in season 1?
I don't know. I think that's a little bit of the gamesmanship of seasons 1.
Well, if we don't meet Sauron in season 1, then we can't. If they go and they capture somebody and bring him to Numenor, everyone's going to say, "Oh, that's Sauron." So if your rumors about we don't meet Sauron in the first movie or the first season, except for he's off screen, I'm thinking this particular activity of him physically being captured is later, is season 2.
And this is after, Sauron's beyond his Anatar, I'm your friend and buddy, I'm helping you make rings. He's really the enemy in this scene, but yet he's defeated. He's overcome because we're so strong and we're great.
So are these two things like a season 2 thing and then a season 3 thing?
Could be. Hard to say.
How? Oh well, the dates are there. How much later?
This is in late age. We're coming up on the last three matchups here in the second age. The second one on this page or in this matchup is Ar-Pharazôn again, and part of the seduction is back to you guys can have eternal life. And let me tell you how you're going to get it. The Valar are not your friends, but you are stronger. You beat me, so why don't you build this tremendous armada, even bigger than what you came at me with, and go take over Valinor. I'm telling you, if you are able to occupy Valinor, instant eternal life. That's what they're keeping from you. That's they talk about the gift of men. That's ridiculous. You can do better than that. So tell you what, build this armada and attack Valinor and take over. And Ar-Pharazôn, great idea. I think I'll do it. So he builds this great armada and assails Valinor, and it does not go well.
Josh, I keep telling you guys what my metric is. Like, what do I want to see in the show? I don't know how to vote here, but Josh, what is your metric for voting?
It's honestly probably okay. It's probably a little a column A, a little a column B type. I mean, like to go back talking about, I love the Rivendell sequence. Obviously collectibles wise, I have that environment from Weta. It's a beautiful sequence, both in The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. So it'll be neat to see that on screen if we get a chance to see that. It's obviously reading the different texts and stuff, reading that's really great. But the whole sequence, like I said, of watching the men that get the rings and watch them descend into becoming ringwraiths is pretty cool. I think visually, I think that would be neat to see. So, like I said, compared to what you said, I mean, I just want to see some of this on screen. I want to see some of it come to life more than just, what's in my own head or what was on the page. So, and then that's part of it. I mean, part of it is, where are some of the importance of these events? Like I said, with the forging of the One Ring versus the 3 Elven rings. That's a rough matchup to me.
Well, what about this one? We're on this one right now. Sauron.
I would go with Sauron is defeated here, because without that, you don't have the Numenoreans getting lied to and twisted in a way that they don't realize they're being twisted into, and that those events lead to the fall of Numenor and ultimately the events of the War of the Ring and Lord of the Rings and stuff like that. So I think that that's a really important event. Not that Ar-Pharazôn assailing the Valinor is not an important event, but to me, being more of a third age person, late second age, third age person, I a little bit more towards Sauron being defeated because of the impact that directly has on the events of the Lord of the Rings and the books and the movies. So there's importance for me for that. So it's like I said, it's a little a column A, a little a column B, because it could be depending on the matchup. It could be something I want to see visually come to life besides just what we have in text, or it could be, in this instance, yes, I want to see Sauron defeated on screen somehow. That would be cool. But also the importance of it and what happens down the road, the importance of what it leads to.
Jim, is there any room for Amazon to fudge the order of things as they happen?
Yeah, that's actually one of the theories that's going around, is that Amazon, in fact, it was in one of the articles that came out from Amazon, that they're kind of compressing things. And that's pretty common as you're turning, well, they don't have a book to begin with, but as you're taking this long 3,600 year age of the second age and trying to figure out how to show that without having all your human characters dying off every couple of hundred years. So there may be some compression and even some resequencing. This one is pretty intriguing. I think, this literal matchup here, if you like, psychological drama and intrigue and the unfolding of plot, you're going to be for Sauron defeated, kind of like Josh said. If you like big honking set pieces, man, then that attack of the Armada and the overwhelming, because it's going to lead into this next one, which is the Uber event, which is Numenor is destroyed. So just as we saw Numenor raise up, match 6, the first one in this mix, is Numenor is overwhelmed. It's Tolkien's Atlantis myth. It is the sinking back into the depths of this island, and the destruction of everybody on it.
Can we go back for just a quick second? Because the other thing about this matchup is it's a direct cause and effect.
Yeah, exactly.
And with Ar-Pharazôn sailing the Armada over to Valinor, is this about the same time that Elendil and Isildur are secreting off the faithful? I mean, I know that that's a separate event and whatnot, but it's basically runs concurrent.
Exactly. And unfortunately, that was one of the bubble things, because Isildur and his sons, while Numenor is sinking over there, have launched several ships away from Numenor before it sinks and are heading back to Middle Earth. And then you get the second matchup of match 6, and they're going to form the kingdoms of Arnor and Gondor. Numenor has already colonized a lot of Middle Earth already, so it's not like brand new territory. But specifically, we now have the leftover royalty of Numenor that have been the faithful and have been opposing Ar-Pharazôn and his corruption, and opposing Sauron and his machinations. And so they're going to come, and then they're going to build new kingdoms, Arnor and Gondor, and they're going to plant the white tree that Isildur managed to smuggle out of Numenor because Ar-Pharazôn chopped down its forebear. And so again, you get that continuity back all the way back to the two trees is happening.
All right. Rumi Dodson is in the chat room. She says, or they say, big honking set pieces for me.
Yeah.
Well, and this is going to be another one, right? I mean, you're going to get that with the ships sailing with this as well.
I just want to say hi to Rumi. That's right.
Everybody.
Is it possible though that Elendil and Isildur in their ships are witnessing this?
It would make for great cinema or TV.
Which one, the left or the right?
The destruction. Yeah.
Yeah, and to have them witnessing it as they see, he's sailing away and they're like going, oh, this is bad, and they get on their boats and they sail the other direction.
If you want to pump the drum, it's like just in time, just ahead of the big wave kind of a deal.
Yeah. Because obviously you have to have a witness to it. I mean, aside from the people that are actually still on the island, that aren't going to get off.
So this is the cataclysmic event of the Second Age. There's still a little more to come. So match 6 has the destruction of Numenor, and then you get Isildur and his sons will arrive, or Elendil and his sons will arrive.
Do you think they fight over the land, like colonizers do? Like, I want Belgium. Well, I want India. Like,
there's a bit of that, and so I don't know how much of this we'll see, but there is an offspring of Numenor. They're called the Black Numenoreans. I don't think it's a race thing. It's just almost a black-heartedness, and they've formed a capital in Umbar. There's a theory that we might see some of these Numenorean royalty who are at least one of the recipients of one of those rings of men. And so who knows what kind of intrigue we're going to find and what kinds of battles we're going to see. But this is the remnant of Numenor themselves, the only ones. It's like the ships have been burned except for ours. And here we arrive on the shores of Middle Earth, and we have to establish ourselves. There's no going back to where we were.
All right. Is there another one for this round?
Match 6, match 7 is the Numenoreans start building things, like is Isengard and Orthanc. So around that same time when they're arriving, they start building.
It's that old? It's that old?
This is the second construction. Exactly. And so there are other things that they're building, like Osgiliath and Minas Ithil and Minas Anor, which become Minas Tirith and Minas Morgul. And so all in battles around trying to resist Sauron. Sauron is still here. There's going to be continuity and familiarity with who they're battling against. And so this all ultimately forms into the last alliance of elves and men at the very end of the Second Age.
That's what we see in Peter Jackson's movie.
And now we're into the movies. We're into the prologue of the Fellowship of the Ring. because we see this last alliance that's formed between elves and men. And then I'll just put to the last round. And then there's a big battle. There's the Battle of Daggerlad on the fields, and then there's a siege of Mordor. And you see Elendil and Gil-galad, who we see in that prologue in Peter Jackson's film, battling against Sauron, and both of them are killed. And yet at the end, and this is a picture that actually was integrated into the film that Alan Lee produced of this last battle of Isildur with the broken Narsil raised up and cutting the ring off of Sauron's finger, which is the end of the Second Age.
You know, if Amazon does it right, both of these things are going to mean more to fans than even what they mean now.
Well, yeah, because you're going to get to know Elendil and Gil-galad. You're going to know Isildur.
Yeah.
You know, you're going to have met them and heard them speak with each other and how they got along with each other and what they thought of life and things like that. With, you know, both with the elves and the men in Numenor.
Yeah.
So
right.
you'll be contacted.
Right. So right now, I think most people would vote for Isildur cuts the One Ring because that's the hero moment that we've all seen and love, and it got extended editions for. But if Amazon pulls this show off, people are going to vote for the second one or the first one. Elendil and Gil-galad perish because
Elendil and Gil-galad's the High King, and Elendil is the High King of men. It's literally the two High Kings, and their alliance. They're at the heart of it. And if we are invested in their characters, then this is going to be really tragic. Not just swinging around a mace, but the loss of these lives will be meaningful for us.
Well, Jim, we've got a bunch of Dwarven swing voters in the chat who don't know who to vote for here. Give us your take. How would you bring swing voters to your choice?
I think it's going to be hard, like you said, to vote against. You know, the age-ending event of Sauron being disembodied and the ring is lost. So I suspect on this one, I think this winning of the One Ring is potentially a Final Four.
Did we take a vote on match 7?
I mean, Josh has probably got the best example, best perspective here, because one is very much a merch thing and the other is kind of a...
Well, yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of cool merchandise that has come from, obviously, you know, you've got collectibles for Isengard and Orthanc over the years, and the Last Alliance, there's been some Saurons made, and like I said, Isildur has a statue, and there's a bust of Elendil. So there's some pretty cool stuff out there. I mean, for this particular matchup, again, I think it's, like I said, in this instance, I would go with the Last Alliance of men, you know, elves and men, simply because of its importance to what we see throughout the Third Age. You get, you know, these two groups that come together and defeat, you know, Sauron and set forth events that we see both in the book and the films. Not that Isengard and Orthanc being constructed doesn't have impacts, because we know obviously Saruman takes over, you know, Orthanc and you know, so there's things that happen. They're definitely important, but there is to me, the weight is to the Last Alliance. And then, like, you know, there's obviously been some really cool stuff that's been made. If collectibles factors into your voting, then you know, it's definitely a case where
I've got another argument for Orthanc, and that is go to the OneRing.net and look back a day or two. Demosthenes posted a really great story breaking down Saruman and why he wanted Orthanc and where he was. I guess he spent an awful lot of time in Gondor in the libraries and studying the lore and everything like that. So he goes into a really long talk about that and the fact that there might be a Palantir in there. Of course, we now know that there is, but he was sort of guessing at the fact that Orthanc might have a Palantir. And what was, you know, was he going in with a good heart of being, you know, the gap of Rohan, of guarding it, Or was he already starting to thinking about doing his own search for the missing One Ring? So it's a really great story if you want context on Saruman and its place, and Orthanc and its place in the overall story in the Third Age.
Right.
So,
And I'm just going to bring this up on screen. One of our staffers, longtime staffers of the One Ring, built Orthanc out of Lego. That is a real photo of a real custom Orthanc.
we don't see your share screen.
Yeah, you don't, but our audience does. And
Okay. Yeah, you're talking at our art show for the long expected party.
You could have seen if you went to one of our Oscar parties, you could see this, and there were a bunch of little Ents over there, and this is the type of staff that we have. This is what we do for fun. And Jim, what he does for fun is make these awesome PowerPoints.
So yeah, I mean, one of the reasons I put this on was Tolkien was fascinated by Orthanc, so much so that this is one of the images that he actually spent time drawing. So that's why,
yeah, it shows his name. Yeah.
All right, that's the second age bracket, the top right bracket that you see on your screen now. If you go to theonering.net, again, there is a button for second age voting. If you click on that, you can get more. Click the question mark, and it gives you a little more information and some photos, beautiful photos that you've seen. And if you want to vote, you click the yellow button at the top, and you start your voting round. And again, there's no qualifiers on how to vote. You can vote for the artwork that we have posted. You can vote for the lore from the books that you remember. You can vote for what you want to see in Amazon's TV show. There's no qualifiers on any of this. But we've got one more bracket to go. That is the bottom right one, the Third Age, the one of all the events that you should all be familiar with. So I think we can just power through. We don't really need to explain anything here. Let's just get through them.
Let's just vote.
Some of you may not be as familiar with the early ones, but there aren't that many early ones. This is a tough bracket because we are familiar with it. And so some of you are going to be really angry that we left stuff out.
I think you could do a whole tournament just on the Third Age alone, to be honest.
We could. And so we had to leave a lot of stuff off, obviously, and you may not be happy with our choices. And then it's like, well, how do you choose? Because there are really very significant and familiar things. So first matchup coming up is Isildur loses the One Ring. He is slain by orcs on the River Anduin, and presto, all of a sudden what we thought was the heirloom of his house is lost into the murk.
Do you think he turns into a
He dies. No, he's dead.
No, I think he didn't have
the ring is gone. The ring actually left him. They were able to shoot him because the ring left him. It fell off his finger, and then he got shot with the arrows.
So the One Ring doesn't Nazgul you, only...
Yeah. He wasn't going to take it back. He wanted the power for himself. He wasn't going to take it back to his master. So it left him and wanted to wait for somebody else who would be more pliable.
The One Ring will Nazgul you. It turned Smeagol into Gollum. And he was heading, hobbits have a particular, or proto-hobbits have a particular resilience. But, so Isildur just didn't have the ring long enough, only a couple years.
Okay.
So,
and he's up against, who's he up against here?
Up against the wizards, or the Astari, the 5 wizards arriving in Middle-earth. Now, this is actually another part of the speculation of the Amazon series, because, some are saying, well, those 2 blue wizards that remain unnamed because their names aren't included in the actual text of the Lord of the Rings. So that's why Gandalf and the Hobbit says, I forget what their names are. So some are arguing maybe the blue wizards are the early vanguard of the Astari, but around the year 1000 in the Third Age, Maiar, in the form of old men, arrive on the shores of Middle-earth to counter the threat of Sauron. That's why they're there. And they have lots of different personalities and temperaments. We see 3 of them in Radagast and in Gandalf and Saruman.
Wait, you're telling me that there is no chance we're going to get a cute baby Yoda version of Gandalf?
Well, they'll never be young. I mean, they'll never be young.
Yeah, Maiar aren't young or old. Now, who knows? Amazon may bend that. And I've seen some artwork that has a young Gandalf at the feet of Nana, who is his sort of patron Vala, or one of the Valar. And Sauron's patron is Aule, the dwarf maker. I forget who Radagast's is, but
Something natural. It's
Okay.
got to be something natural.
maybe Yavanna. I'd have to go back and research that. But
What's the what is in Jim? What's in your opinion? What is the best qualifier for this round of or this matchup? Is it what is most dramatic to you or most important to the future of Middle Earth? What is the qualifier?
for me, Isildur losing the ring is just a continuation, so it's kind of a continuity thing. The wizards arriving is pretty cool. It's a game changer. So
Okay, let's moving on. Game changer.
Game changer. Match two. The early hobbits migrating was one of those bubble teams that actually made it into this round, and it was a cool event. Around 1600, hobbits are migrating from around the Bree area and actually come in across the Brandywine River, or the Branduin, and start building the Shire. So that's kind of cool. Meanwhile, about 850 years later, Deagle finds the One Ring. That's the scene that we see at the beginning of the Return of the King, and is immediately murdered by Smeagol, who wants the ring for himself.
Kathy, what's more important?
Well, where the hobbits live is beautiful, but they can live anywhere, and they're basically going to be hole dwellers. They're basically going to be farmers, and wherever they live, that they're agrarian. But Deagle finding the ring, because it sat there for 2,500 years under the water. I mean, it's it needed to be found, and this was the first chance. In fact, it must have known that Gollum was up, or that Smeagol was above, because Deagle probably would have been harder to mold.
All right.
The first test of that ring was, would it inspire murder? And it did almost instantly.
There you go. Next one.
Okay, match three. Smaug arrives on the scene and destroys Dale and occupies Erebor and sits on his pile of gold. And that, a connected story. And now we're into the Hobbit, because Bilbo finds that One Ring, because Gollum has lost it, or the ring has decided to leave Gollum and try to get back to its maker, Sauron. And so these are pretty close to one another as far as the date differences.
I want to go to the chat room. Varking, what do you vote for? Because you're Mr. Dwarves, but this is not a good thing for the dwarves. So are you voting because this is part of the dwarf storyline? Or are you voting against it because it's bad for dwarves? Curious. Swing voter here. Josh, where are you at? I think I know what you would vote for, just from a collectible standpoint.
Well, I do have the Smaug from Weta, and it is a fantastic piece. I'm going to go with, at least right now, I mean, I could always be convinced the other way if enough evidence was shown.
The ultimate swing voter here, folks. He can be convinced.
I'm at least initially, my gut says go with Bilbo finds the One Ring, because again, if it's again, little column A, little column B, there's an importance here to Bilbo finding the One Ring and what the dominoes that fall after he finds the One Ring, how it ends up with who it ends up with, all the chain of events that go with that. That's a really important event. Not that I don't like Smaug and think it was a beautiful design and everything, but when it comes to events from The Hobbit or events from Lord of the Rings, I think the Lord of the Rings films are better than the Hobbit films, even though I love the Hobbit films. And I think
these are both in the Hobbit.
And well, I know, but what I'm saying is that with Bilbo finding the One Ring, obviously the first time we see that is in the Lord of the Rings films, but that Bilbo finding the One Ring sets off the chain of events in the Lord of the Rings books and films. So we wouldn't have those, which I think are better than the Hobbit, if Bilbo doesn't find the One Ring. If that makes
But
sense.
I'm going to counter with, if Smaug hadn't attacked Erebor and forced everyone out and left them wandering for years and finally wanting to take over and defeat Smaug, they never would have gone to hire Bilbo. And of course, you're right, Jim, the ring leaves Smeagol because he's too smart. He went and hid for 500 years under a mountain, and the ring was like going, all right, clock's ticking, we got to get moving. The ring obviously couldn't start Bilbo on his quest because of Smaug, but without Smaug as an impetus, Bilbo never would have left home, and Gollum would have been left with the ring. So I'm going to go with Smaug.
Hashtag vote Bilbo. Moving on. Next one.
Yeah. My only parting comment on this, voting for Smaug is a bit of a retrospective vote because there are echoes of those earlier ages that we're seeing. You know, he's consistent with that Glaurung story. He's actually consistent with that War of Wrath because we get the greatest dragon ever, and then Calagon the Black, who's one of the winged dragons. And so there's a retrospect and it's a last gasp of dragon.
Yeah.
If you like that kind of reminiscence and the dragony things, you'll vote that way. As opposed to if you're tracking with the story of the ring all the way to the Second Age and its formation, into its loss and its refinding, and ultimately into its destruction, you're probably following and tracking with how important that is to the overarching storyline. So again, it's what you like and what you're into.
Silly serpents.
That's a silly serpent.
Match 4 closes out The Hobbit with us with Smaug slain by Bard. This is again a Tolkien drawn image, so not quite as fancy as some of the others you might have seen.
But from the hand of Tolkien. That's what I'm saying. You guys can vote based on the artwork alone.
Versus, and this is an Alan Lee drawing of the Council of Elrond. And so, you know, the telling of
wrong? That is wrong.
It is wrong. Oh, typo. You're right that he's wrong. So yeah, sorry about that.
Yeah, we'll be updating that.
He's
a G.
He's gonna go and edit it right now.
He's editing it right now.
I would do that myself. I would be like,
I can't stand
and
that.
that's what happens when you're doing computer stuff. I'm telling you right now, when you're sitting there and you stare at a screen for so long, you're like, you get glassy eyed.
And when it comes to Tolkien's words, there isn't always a good spell check for it because spell check doesn't recognize most of them.
Also, you've saved them to your dictionary. At any rate,
does Josh, does Weta or anyone sell the Black Arrow?
Yeah, Weta did a. I know Weta did a
Right
prop.
Wait, what?
Jim's
got one.
Right there.
That's the arrow that slayed Slay.
Well, that's the movie version.
Weta did one, and Jim, correct me. You might know this because you do some of the prop stuff. United Cutlery did one too, didn't they?
I think they did. I've got the Weta one, which I like.
So there's been a couple of based on the Hobbit films. Yeah. Those are the only two. Those are the only two versions I know of it. I mean, I'm sure somebody's made their own version at home, like so many people can do, especially with 3D printing and stuff now. But those are the only two versions that I know about.
Wow.
There you go. Black Arrow, Sam Sword.
And it's huge. I mean, I know on screen it probably looks like it's tiny, but seriously, the thing is massive. It's I don't know. What is it? It's probably 4 feet long.
It's a double window. So yeah.
Yeah, that's fun. Yeah. What's the next one, Jim?
Okay, so you'll have to decide. The Council of Elrond is like the longest chapter ever in the Lord of the Rings, but you get all kinds of information, and it's what forms the Fellowship, which is the first of match 5. And so we've got the Fellowship that's all together and on the road with the ring, and so and then an iconic moment. The one that Josh is going to buy every time it comes out in the new variation is Gandalf battling the Balrog on the Bridge of Khazad-dûm.
Well, and what's funny is, of course, we started off with, the council. So it's almost like, one of them doesn't have to move on, because it's like one leads to the other. So on that back there, I'm thinking Fall of Smog wins
Both
out.
of them break. Gandalf dies. Gandalf the Grey dies, and the Fellowship breaks apart. So both are failures. I don't know how to vote.
Okay, I'm gonna surprise people here,
Oh no.
but I would vote for Formation of the Fellowship.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And I love that sequence in the first the Gandalf falling, that whole Moria sequence. Yes, I cried the first time I saw it. I've cried when I've watched it since. It's a very emotional sequence. I love it. Obviously, as a collectible. I mean, I spent quite a bit of money on that Prime 1 statue. And so, I mean, obviously, I like that sequence. I like the Balrog character. It was just a fascinating thing to see on screen. It just grabbed you. However, the formation of the Fellowship, the importance of it, and in some ways, I'll get somewhat philosophical for a second. So grant me just a second or two. There is a sense for me as a human being where reading the books, watching the films, the formation of the Fellowship was in some ways life-changing, in a sense of it made me realize we really are in this together. We as a group of human beings, we are a fellowship. Whether or not we want to be or not, we are a fellowship. We're all from all different places. We have all different, how we want to do about things, but we're in this together. So the formation of the Fellowship was a coming together of people who have different goals and objectives, but realize we need to do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. And that's ultimately, for mankind, what I would love to see is us to decide to do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. So that's why I would go with Formation of the Fellowship, because I think that there's just something larger in that, philosophically speaking.
Well, a comment from the chat room. Roomy Dodson says, "Not surprised, Josh."
Plus, you need
Hi,
people.
Rumi.
You need people.
Rumi knows me all too well.
By the way, another comment in the chat room. I had never put this together. 9 walkers in the Fellowship for 9 riders.
Oh yeah.
You never put that together? They actually said that. Well, I think, is it the book or is it the movie where they say it? One of them actually says it.
Yeah, it's mentioned someplace.
I think Elrond is 9 fellowship. So yeah, absolutely.
Wait, so this is explicit, like Tolkien explicitly points this out, like the balance of the Force, like there are 9 fellowship against 9 Nazgul riders.
Also 9 walkers against 9 riders. Yeah.
It's meant to be their counterbalance.
Yeah. Yep.
Wow. Wow. Well, math isn't my strong point, as we determined at the top of the show. Let's move on.
Yeah, plus, you need people of intelligence on this sort of mission quest thing.
We know who's playing Pippin.
All right. So match 6, 2 iconic charges. So I don't know how it's just going to come down to which one you like best. This is a really interesting piece of art from Joe. She's got some very interesting interpretations of a lot of different Tolkien things, events. So this is her version of the last march of the Ents and the ultimate destruction of Isengard, and then the ride of the Rohirrim, which I will say there were 3 events in The Lord of the Rings that Tolkien talked about several years after he'd written it, which he described as still moving his heart. 2 of those events did not make it into our competition. They involved Sam and Frodo and Gollum on the stairs of Cirith Ungol and a point of repentance, and then a moment of clarity in the woods of Lothlorien on a particular hill. But this one, the Ride of the Rohirrim, is one of the things that still stirred Tolkien's heart. I think the March of the Ents did too, because you got trees to go to battle.
Are we talking the Ride of the Rohirrim at the end of Two Towers?
No.
Pelennor Field.
Pelennor Field. So both of these, the dates on these, these last ones are all happening in March of Third Age 3019.
Yeah.
Everything is happening.
All within days of each other. Yeah.
And so this is the Witch King is at the gates of Minas Tirith, which have never been entered. He's about to go in with a great ram of
Grand.
and then the cock crows and the horns of the Rohirrim resound, and the Witch King has to go off to battle, and Minas Tirith is saved, at least for the moment. And that dawn and the cock crowing, the rooster crowing, was for Tolkien such a luminous and moving moment for him. It still moved him to tears after he'd written this.
Then question for you, like for me, Last March of the Ents is the only time I cried in the entire trilogy. Yeah. But a question for you, Jim. You grew up reading Tolkien. You've read this book. You probably had a mind's eye of what is it. Which one of these scenes exceeded your long-held expectations?
Yeah, I was kind of ticked off about the setup to the Last March of the Ents, because they kind of had to have Merry and Pippin trick him into dramatic something or other.
Yeah, because in the book they decide. I mean, the mood ends with them deciding they're going to go do battle, as opposed to them coming in. Yeah, it's done differently, and so it's almost like it took their agency away from them.
So for me, the Ride of the Rohirrim on the fields of Pelennor, this actually won. I forget which year it was. We were matching up different kinds.
The videos are the scenes.
And this Ride of the Rohirrim actually was our victor one of those years. Not trying to sway the votes on this at all, but that's for me was a.
Wait, you're telling me like the Last March of the Ents was one of the top 3 most amazing film spectacles for me of all time, and you're telling me that hardcore lore aficionados have a big issue with the movie
it's
version?
It's like them changing Faramir. It's the same thing. It's like
I've never heard this before.
It's not the March of the Ents. It's the fact that Treebeard told them, well, we decided not to go to war. Just like Faramir said, well, we decided we're going to take you to Gondor. Or just like Sam on the stairs of Cirith Ungol says, well, I guess I'll
There was a lot of key points that were changed in the film, that all those 3 characters were much more pure.
Yeah. So anyway.
Oh my God, I'm my mind is blown
Justin,
right now.
Try to remember, you need to read the books. Read the books.
I can't. Josh, where were you at in this Ent issue?
I would go with the Ent issue. Well, like I said before, I was just finishing up reading Return of the King, the book, just before the film came out, because I had decided between the first 2 being out, I was like, I want to read the third book, get through all 3 books before the third film came out. I guess kind of spoiling it for myself. So I didn't have, and we've talked about this before, I didn't have some of these same expectations as someone like Jim did, who's read the books for years and years and years and years before seeing the films. I didn't have that expectation. So it didn't bother me, that particular change. Now, some of the other changes, like the hobbits being taken to Gondor and being in him, Frodo showing the ring to the Ringwraith, and those going that kind of stuff still irked me, and bothers me even now. But that was not one change that bothered me, I guess, because I don't I'm not a big fan of the Ents.
Ooh.
Not a big fan of the Ents. I thought that sequence in the book actually was one of those sequences that was you have to kind of, for me, I had to kind of work my way through. The first time I read it, I thought it was a little slow. I like it better now, having read it multiple times, obviously. But the first time reading through, I'm like, these guys take a long time to say
hello.
Oh my goodness gracious! But yeah, the motives have changed. But yeah, I love the design of Treebeard. And getting ready to talk to Daniel Falconer, obviously, he played a role in the design of Treebeard stuff. So, but yeah, I wasn't particularly bothered. I loved the Ride of the Rohirrim, the music, the sequences, the armor. And then
Like,
you know,
did you hear the horn with Merry and Pippin, Pippin and Gandalf, and they hear it?
yeah, it's that I would go for that sequence because that sequence to me was just more it wowed me more. And then obviously, you know, it just I like I said, I went in with less issues with the other, and I'm not a massive fan of the Ents.
Can I just
All right.
add that in the films, I mean, the Ents don't play a whole lot of, I don't know what, because they get created, obviously, and then we see them in the Third Age when Merry and Pippin discover Treebeard. I don't know how much of a place Ents play throughout the rest of the time, but gosh, I would love to see if they try a take on what the women, the Ent wives look like.
I would like to see that expanded upon if possible, like
If we ever end up somewhere near Fangorn.
what happened to them. I would love to.
Ants have got to be like a season 3 or season 4 special prize for us fans. Like, you know. It's... All right, match 7.
All right, we're coming into the home stretch here. Match 7, 2 iconic moments again. It's almost unfair that they're against one another. One is Éowyn and Merry facing the Witch-king. And the Witch-king is defeated. No man can defeat me is the prophecy. And so a woman and a hobbit, one armed with a sword and courage, and one armed with this Numenorean blade, sneaking in behind, and their combination.
And I Am No Man is the name of our second panel at WonderCon in 2 weeks. Just saying.
Next weekend.
A week and a half. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
But up against that iconic scene is the destruction of the One Ring.
Oh gosh. That one's pretty darn important for the overall story. But I'm voting for Éowyn because, I mean, I've got her shield, I've got her dress, I've got her sword. I'm voting for Éowyn. That's just me.
So this will be a tough match. There's a lot of sentiment going on in this match.
Again, if Amazon does this right, does their show correctly, we will know the background of the Witch-king and his 2,000-year history or 1,000-year history, and what status and role, and maybe he was the greatest fighter of the battlefield, and maybe he is played by an actor like Russell Crowe, and maybe he gets turned into the Witch-king. I'm saying, like, if Amazon does this right, this becomes even more emotional and more powerful because we have the context, even more context. And separate from Amazon, I think that the War of the Rohirrim anime that Warner Brothers is doing, New Line Cinema is doing, it's going to make this scene even more powerful because we've seen the artwork. It's going to be giant battles in Rohan. We're going to see the power of the Shield Maidens of Rohan and the legacy, and we're basically going to know by the time we have War of the Rohirrim anime in theaters and the 5th season of Amazon's show. Both of these key characters, we're going to know their whole history, their backstory, and what it means for a Shield Maiden of Rohan to slay one of the greatest battlefield fighters, and the Witch-king and his legacy. Things can only go up. And I honestly, I know there's a lot of hesitation for the new stuff coming out. I just don't see how they could mess it up. As far as this scene, it's already the most beloved scene in Lord of the Rings. It can only go up from here.
And when this happened in the movie, when she chopped off the head of the fell beast, I literally leaped out of my seat, and I was at the premiere. And I leapt out of my seat and screamed yes at the premiere. Of course, I was in the last row, but I'm sure all the people around me heard me. But I mean, I've been waiting to see that my whole life.
Now, in addition to all that's, I agree. I would also like to see the forging of the Numenorean knife that Merry uses that basically unravels the fabric.
Oh, yes.
We have already been told that
There he is, right there in the bottom of the screen.
Yeah, he is. So no ordinary sword can penetrate. And yet this unraveling that I think is.
And he's also not a man.
Yeah, so
because he's a hobbit. So I'm thinking that's the only reason why that and the blade itself is the reason why he's able to pierce him.
Yeah, so there are spells and magic against.
Well, plus some of the other blades. I mean, the blade that he uses when he stabs Frodo in the shoulder.
Well, the Morgul knife. Yeah. So it'll be intriguing to see if there are any
see some of these weapons. Yeah. Well, plus, isn't the Witch King of Angmar? He was already somebody who was practicing some sort of dark art before the ring came to him.
Yeah, and so magic and wizardry and that kind of thing. I thought that Dwayne Johnson was going to play the Witch King. Well, maybe that's the article that's coming out on April 1. Is that right?
No spoilers. No spoilers. We gotta preface spoilers with that. Hey, I gotta agree with the chat room here. There's not a lot of Dane Ironfoot. What's up with the lack of dwarves and kings? There's no Thorin. There's no reclaiming Moria with Balin.
Yeah, I know the battle was. It's one of our missing pieces. Is the battle of the five armies? I know
battle of Azanul Bazaar. Like, there's just so much to. Jim, what's going on? What's going on? What do you got against dwarves?
Go to our last match and see what's there.
I told you that this was going to be disappointing. Here's our last match, which doesn't have dwarves, other than if Gimli is at the wedding and crowning. So, last matchup, King Elisar is crowned. You know, the return of the king and the kingdom to Gondor, the time of peace. It's ushering us getting closer to the fourth age of Middle Earth, which we don't have in the tournament. So Elisar is crowned by Gandalf. Frodo brings Gandalf the ancient crown of Elendil, and we get continuity of that story up against ultimately Frodo, Bilbo, and actually the other three ring bearers, the elven ring bearers, who are now Galadriel, Elrond, and Gandalf, are the ones that have ended up with these now kind of lost power elven rings. They all jump on this boat in the third age 3021 and head off to the Undying Land.
Is there any significance to that boat?
Just well, the significance is it has the capability. Because one of the other things that happened back in that War of Wrath is that the Earth was reshaped. It was basically a flat Earth theory, then it becomes
round
globe. But there is this thing that Tolkien called the straight line, which is what these elven ships are able to do. So literally, the Valinor and the Undying Lands are not accessible to normal humans and normal boats, but they are to these elven boats. So it's an unbelievable honor for anyone who is mortal, like Frodo and Bilbo, to be invited to journey into the Undying Lands.
Doesn't Sam eventually get there as well? I mean, because you've got Sam and then is it Legolas and Gimli or not?
Yes, and Legolas and Gimli all end up being able to go.
And I get Sam because he was a ring bearer, but and then Legolas.
But we're not voting for those guys. We're voting for Frodo, Bilbo, and the team.
I realize, yeah. And this one is like the crowning is the promise, and it's the long arc for the Numenorean line.
Right.
I've never understood
the end of the ring bearers is the end of the rings.
Why, if men are so prideful, why does Gandalf get to crown the king?
Because Greg and Tim Hildebrand wrote that, or drew it, or
they drew it, but no.
Is it in the book? It's in the book, isn't it?
Absolutely in the book. They wouldn't have drawn it if it wasn't.
Yeah, well, he's 7,000 years old, so of course he could do that.
Crowns Aragorn because he was the leader ultimately, the glue against the resistance in the whole era.
Yeah, but why Gandalf? Why does Gandalf get to crown? Isn't there someone else that can betroth the king? Wait, wrong word.
I wouldn't think so. Is there anybody higher than the king? No.
Gandalf is the most powerful dude around now that Sauron's overthrown. The Witch King is overthrown. So Gandalf is primo power numero uno left and right. So it's a Maya.
And he's his friend. So wouldn't you rather a friend gave it to you than some strange bishop or something?
Final thoughts, Josh, on this one.
Just film point of view, both of these sequences are like, super important, obviously, very emotional. During the crowning of King Elisar, you get the, him bowing to the hobbits, you get that whole sequence of events. The Frodo and Bilbo leaving Middle Earth, knowing the backstory that was one of the first scenes that they had all filmed together. And that they were able to pull off the emotion and stuff that takes for that, and the fact that I'm probably crying through all of this. I would vote for King Elisar being crowned because of how much I like Aragorn's character, and his arc, especially maybe even so more in the movies, because I'm more of a fan in some ways of a guy who knows he probably should be the leader, but isn't necessarily sure he should be the leader because, of the power that comes with that, and can you handle it correctly? I really like Aragorn as a character. I think that's there's just he's really, really important to me. He's my favorite character. So I probably would go with that, but there's no wrong choice here, and it kind of sucks that these two events are because I would vote for the other, because the ultimate sacrifice that Frodo especially made to do the right thing. He said, he doesn't die in Middle Earth, but he essentially dies in Middle Earth, because of the ring. So I don't know. This is not an easy choice, and I don't know.
For me, it's an easy choice because look, if you look at that painting from Alan Lee and you look at a screenshot from Peter Jackson's movie, they look exactly the same, as well it should. King Elisar is the worst part of Peter Jackson's movies. I don't think Viggo Mortensen cleaned up well enough. I think the wig was off. Aragorn should be clean shaven. He should have never had any stubble. They totally got the lore wrong with Elisar and Aragorn and everything between. So if you want to be lore accurate,
are a valid reason for either.
So I'm not saying that's the only reason you should vote or not vote, but I'm just saying that there's a lot wrong with King Elisar being crowned in all forms of media versus that ship sailing and how important that ship is. As Jim just explained, it can sail in a straight line, and it looks like it should, and it sounds like it should. This is like a greatest hits album versus an experimental album.
Well, and actually, with these two stories, Elisar being crowned is basically the conclusion of the long arc of Numenor and the Numenor falling and the faithful sailing away, because he's the direct line descendant. So it's the continuation and ending of that storyline in a satisfying manner, that now the king is back, and then his line will continue with.
Actually, that's not the way I interpret it, Kathy, because I see the King Elisar crowning as a continuity story. If I was contrasting these two, the closure story is Frodo and Bilbo sailing off to the west.
Oh yeah. Well, and I was going to contrast that. One is the promise of Numenor. The other one is the finality of the Rings of Power, the final ending to that long story arc. And of course, right. Fran and Philippa and Peter, they mentioned that whenever they were making decisions of what to keep in the book or from the books into the movies, they always thought whatever moves the ring forward.
Right.
That was always how they had to make their decisions on what to keep and what to cut. Was, does it move the ring forward? Right.
And in contrast, that may be why you're unhappy with the Elisar crowning thing, because the story of the ring is now over. It's the criticism of the whole Return of the King movie, since we got this ending after ending after ending. Oops, sorry.
Yeah.
So what's up with that? But what you see with the crowning is an entry into the Fourth Age. It's the beginning.
Yeah, it's the beginning of the Fourth Age.
And it has these ties all the way back into Numenor. So you see this seabird crown. What you don't see is the scepter of a Numenos, which came out of Numenor. You see the white tree in the background, which is all the way back into the year of the tree, because it's the offspring ultimately of Telperion. And so you're seeing these connecting points, and yet this forward view that says the king and the kingdom have returned. It has been waylaid and abruptly cut off, but never cut off completely. And so then you get it leaves you saying, okay, what's next? Tolkien actually started writing a what's next book, and it got too depressed about it and stopped it.
Why did he have to create another conflict for him? Yeah.
So, he got dark. Well, look, folks,
What's our last bubble?
Oh yeah, there were several bubbles. I don't know. So the Battle of Five Armies was on it. I don't know if we have a lot of. Even there, I didn't put a lot of dwarf things on here, but
yeah, what's up with that? Like Gimli could have received the 3 strands of hair. Like that was significant, you know. Like
it was
Gimli,
actually.
like there's a lot. Like the erasure of Dwarven culture and history here is reprehensible, Jim.
we do get a little scouring of the Shire at the end. You know, this Battle of Bywater. This is a book thing as opposed to Sauron getting, shot by Legolas and stabbed by Wormtongue on the Tower of Orthanc.
Well, folks, you can vote to all of this. Voting is now open over at theonering.net. Let me bring that.
Only 3.5 hours.
Page up.
Thank God this only happens once.
Each of the brackets have its own button there. So you just click on one, and then you click the yellow button at the top left that says vote now. But before you vote, you can watch this 3-hour video again, or you can click on any of these images that the team has put together, and you can vote based on the artwork itself. Or you can go to theonering.net, and you can see there's already a very long article, Events of the First Age. We'll have another article going up tomorrow. The
article there is a pre-First Age. We got a First Age and maybe the Second Age coming up tomorrow.
Yeah, so you don't have to vote it all today. You can vote it all. You can take your time, read more. We've done the work. We've pulled the photos. We've pulled the images. We've got articles going up. So you can make an informed decision on your very valuable vote if you're a swing voter on any of these. Like Josh here has been a swing voter on almost anything. He can't find anything bad about anybody. I'm
a full kind of person.
So, hey, voting is open for the next 2 days. It is Tuesday night right now at 8:30. I think we're going to close it around 9 o'clock this Thursday. So you've got 2 days.
2 more days tomorrow.
Two more days to read these articles, look up the artwork, and make an informed decision. Also, look at the brackets, folks. Again, you look at the brackets and see, like, the War of Wrath. What if it wins? Who's it going to go up against? And maybe that'll change how you vote, because this early, there are some upsets in the first round that could really impact going all the way down the brackets here. So you want to vote strategically. And you know what? We're going to do some more live streams. We're going to probably have a results show for this and bring it to you live. Maybe we'll have some other folks from the Discord and from the chat on and get a variety of perspectives on some of this stuff. I know Varking probably has a lot of things to say. Maybe we can get Matt, Nerd of the Rings. Maybe the Tolkien professor wants to chime in the Sweet 16. We're going to reach out to a bunch of people and get some expert analysis on how you should vote moving forward. But right now, voting is open. Go to theonering.net, click on any of these orange buttons, and it'll take you to this black website, and then you click vote now at the top left, and then we're going to tally all that up in a couple days. Thank you, Kathy. Thank you, Josh. Thank you, Jim.
Hey, Justin, here's the question. I don't know if you want to answer this, but who's your final four?
Who's my final four?
Put the grid up.
Okay, let me put it up again here.
Of course, we have to look real close with our magnifying glasses to read it, because
my final four is the
Please put it up on our screens.
Yeah, I'm going to put it up here in a second here.
Okay.
yeah. So
Oh,
while
'cause
he's
he's got
bringing
share.
that up, I'm going to put I'm going to say the final four is the Kinslaying versus the War of Wrath. And I'm going to say the Ride of the Rohirrim and Sauron forges the One Ring. Like, this is a tough one. I didn't know a lot of this.
Yeah.
Rumi wants to know, have we contacted Stephen Colbert to get his take on these choices? Stephen Colbert is a busy man, but we are in his DMs and vice versa. But we're not going to bother him with such infantile
You might just
nonsense.
send him the grid and say, give us your final four. You know, just ask him for his final four. That's all that you have to do.
Last one in the chat says, I don't think I could make strategic votes unless I was having a difficult time. Yeah, see, like a lot of these, like you just have to have a knowledge of it to vote, but then you vote strategically is a trick.
Yeah, I can't even figure out what I'd want to move on from the pre-first age.
This is a hard year.
Amazon, if you're watching, please vote with your heart and vote with your scripts.
I think I would do the Kinslaying. I think that's what I would like to see come out of pre-first age. I like that one as an option. War of the Wrath. Ooh, second age. Second age is where it starts to get. I think you almost have to go with Sauron forges the One Ring just because of the complete importance, like I said, of that particular event. I think that's there's a lot of weight that goes with that. And then
is there anything on that, Josh, that you are ride or die? You better vote for this or else.
Man. I would say I would put on the Fellowship being formed.
That's your ride or die. That's your platform. Josh's political platform, folks, for Middle Earth March Madness is the Fellowship forming. A positive step, a step of creation, not destruction.
That's a good one.
Jim, what is your ride or die, vote for this or else?
Man. For me, the third age, you kind of heard me say it, is going to be the Ride of the Rohirrim. I just think it's such an iconic.
Wow, you guys are stuck in the. Okay, Kathy, what's your ride or die?
Well, golly gee willikers. I'm going to actually give my final four, and then I'll give you that in a minute. But from pre-first stage, I'm going to say Melkor destroying the two trees, because it sort of motivates a lot of what comes afterwards with the elves. For first stage, War of the Wrath kind of has to do it because it sort of reforms all of Middle Earth. In second age, I'm thinking the Edain and Elros reaching Numenor, setting up, the beginning of the Numenorean line starts there. And then for third age, good gosh, that's a lot of story.
You're Eowyn. You have to vote Eowyn.
I know. I just saw it. I was like,
I don't know how after the impassioned speech that you gave about that moment, I don't know how you can't pick that one.
Yeah, Eowyn defeating the Witch-king, because the Witch-king is going to be one of the powerful kings of Ben from our Rings of Power, and Eowyn kicking his butt.
Well, you had a lot of. I felt like a lot of emotion and to how you felt about that moment.
So that's sort of it when you say ride or die, it's not that I expect that to win, because clearly the One Ring being destroyed is kind of where that's going, but
you have to choose one. What's your platform?
My platform, Eowyn defeats the Witch-king.
There it is. Why all of you are stuck
Picked
in the
Rohan.
third age? You need to
Well-
expand your mind here. That's
Okay,
why
well, you know
Amazon's
what?
making
If
this
I go for
TV
second
show.
age, it's going to be the destruction of Numenor.
Yeah.
I'm telling you,
Definitely
out of all the
right hand side of the bracket versus the left hand side of the bracket. I mean, as
Yeah.
far
based on the his history that Professor Jim has given us today, the War of Wrath. I predict we are going to see glimpses of the War of Wrath. I predict that Amazon is going to show us dragons and Balrogs and elves and men and Maiar all battling it out in a prologue, and it's going to be the most amazing hour of television that anyone's ever seen, that we're going to go, oh my God, they went there. And we're all going to love it.
Yeah, and I do want to see Khazad-dûm and Dwarf and the Dwarven realm in the show.
Oh yeah, the peak of Dwarven civilization.
Yeah,
of course.
yeah, but good heavens, lots of good
Well,
stuff.
follow along, everybody. TheOneRing.net on all the socials. In fact, and give a special follow to Mad Eye Gamgee, spelled exactly how you think, Mad Eye Gamgee, because the chat room has requested a picture of you cosplaying in Hobbiton with your lovely wife of 42 years. They want pics, or it didn't happen. So let's see you post something if you could in the next day. Very good. This is TheOneRing.net. We've been doing this for 20 years. We've been doing this for 11 years now. And we're going to keep on doing this. Middle-earth March Madness continues on. Make sure you tell all your friends to vote, share, like, because the next week or two it's going to be so much fun.
And Friday is Tolkien Reading Day.
This Friday is Tolkien Reading Day. Join the Discord. That's right. And so this, don't read it on Twitch because you might get in trouble. But if you join our Discord, there's a bunch of people in the Discord planning activities around Tolkien Reading Day. And now the chat room is spamming, our Discord is spamming Clifford's thing, which is my cue to say, we will see you all next Tuesday. Good night and good luck, or better yet, buenos noches y buena suerte. Bye, everybody.
Bye.